Good morning. Today is July 30, 2019, and today the Lane County Board of Commissioners are beginning a two-day period of board meetings. I do have several adjustments to the agenda. The first is that our agenda for tomorrow which currently includes the work session on the closure of the Peace Health Birth Center and a presentation on good neighbor authority opportunities. We are going to add to that an executive session for tomorrow so that's clear. That'll be on real estate matters. Then we also have an adjustment to today's consent calendar in item 5A3. And incidentally, I have two printed out versions of today's meeting. So if I'm inadvertently referring to one that's older, please call it to my attention. But on both of mine, it says 5A3, and that is the temporary office support assistant position, and Commissioner Bozovich would like that item taken up separately for a separate vote. And you have a 10 o'clock time certain today. It appears we'll be able to meet easily. And we'll also have the Board of Health meeting following the time certain on the Armory. So any other adjustments to the agenda that anyone can call to my attention? Okay, seeing, go ahead, Commissioner.
Is this where we would pull something for discussion that's on the consent calendar?
Yeah, typically we would do that under adjustments. I guess it depends on how we do it, whether we do it when we take up the consent calendar.
Well, I'd like to pull then item 5A2 simply for discussion.
5A2, that's the Apex order. Okay, good. Okay, so those two items, 2 and 3, A2 and 3 will be pulled for separate votes.
Mr. Chair, and then I just noted that there would be, I believe we're noticing an executive session for tomorrow.
Yeah, I announced that.
Okay.
Yep. Very good. Okay, and without further ado, we'll move to our emergency business. Do we have any emergency business?
No.
Well, I see none. Okay. And we'll now move to our public comments and call up Sarah Altmus Pope. Very good. So Ms. Pope, thank you for coming all the way from Oak Ridge, and come up to the podium and give your name and where you live, and our distinguished vice chair will set the timer at 3 minutes. And that green light will come on, and then you'll get a warning light, a yellow, and then there's a red light. And when you get the red light, please stop talking. Welcome.
All right, thank you. My name is Sarah Altimus Pope. I'm from Oak Ridge, Oregon. I live at 48121 Commercial Street. I am here today representing the Southern Willamette Forest Collaborative. I am the coordinator of the collaborative based in Oak Ridge. It's a community-based forest collaborative that brings together a bunch of different partners to work on forest restoration projects that we feel benefit the watershed and also create local jobs. So this is in relation to the issue you guys will discuss tomorrow about G&A timber sales on Forest Service controverted lands. Our steering committee is in support of those projects and similarly in support of stewardship projects on those lands. I have a letter I'd like to submit to the record that more discusses in detail more the G&A projects and how we think they could be beneficial. But in general, the controverted lands are just small percentages of acreages within larger timber sales. And converting those traditional timber sales to either stewardship projects or G&A projects keeps all proceeds that would be earned off those timber sales to be spent in the watershed on further restoration. So we see that as job creating both in the timber harvesting work that that those sales create, but also the related restoration. So for example, stewardship projects we've been working on with the Forest Service have included $500,000 in embedded restoration work that has been awarded to local contractors, and will earn an additional $2.4 million of work that can be put towards restoration in the watershed from stewardship projects. We see GNA having the similar benefits, and I understand you'll hear more about that program in detail tomorrow, but we just want you to know that we are in support of it.
Thank you so much.
And can I submit this for the record?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your good work. Okay, are there any other persons present that wish to speak who had not signed up on our, oh, well, are you here for public comment? Yep, come on up to the front, and I just was calling if there was anyone present who had not signed up who wishes to give public comment. So please come forward, and if you could give your name and where you live, and then our vice chair will set the timer at 3 minutes.
Right.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Chris McAllister. Thank you for having time to hear public comment. I am calling for help from all of our commissioners. We have people who've known since October that there's no path for them right now, and we need to help them now. We need help in Springfield. We have people who are not recognized by our council as being needed to help in the now. We have medically fragile people. We have medics on the street who have no shelter who are medically fragile. We have former EMTs who are homeless and can't get out of the rut they're in. There are heroes in our community. Some people are doing what they can with what they got. We need direction. Everybody's on break. The governor's on break, legislature's on break, council's on break. Who's going to help them when there's no end to the break? We're really trying to do something. The people who are doing the work while there's no one helping in this time of need, they're the ones who have strategies. They're the ones who have items that are working because they're sustaining right now while we wait for the shelter, for the network. I watched your 3-hour session on emergency response the other day. It was awesome. Replace fire with homeless, and you got an answer. There are ways to work with the things we have. There are ways to work with the people we have. We have strong skill sets. We have CSS, NHS, Occupy Medical, Whitebird. These are our heroes in our community. These are people who are taking the time to work through and develop best practices because we don't have a roadmap. We just have strategies, we have partners, and we have community. These are our brothers and sisters. People aren't coming here for the drugs. People aren't coming here for the services. Because, to be real, sometimes this city, as tolerant as it is mean to people who they think caused this. They aren't factoring in that maybe it's a landlord, not an arsonist or a wildfire that drove out this family, and there's no other options. We really need help. And with that, I encourage people to work with our partners, to engage local concepts, to work with our homeless and actually hear our homeless. They know what they need. They know why they were laid off. They know where their family came from. They even know what voices in their head need help. They just need access to meds. They need safe places to be. They need campsites. Well, until we can have a plan that they can work on their own self-reliance, because they're doing it anyways. We have an opportunity to succeed, and it isn't going to be one structure. It's not going to be 5 structures. It's going to be us looking at what we're doing, turning it upside down, and fixing the wheels on it, because it's not rolling, and we need help now. Fire's coming, droughts maybe coming. We don't know, but we do know that we don't know, and that's scary. But I thank you for taking the time to listen. Not all of us are addicts. Not all of us are just broken. Some of us need a chance. Have a good morning.
Thank you so much for your public comment. I'm writing your name on our sign-up sheet. Thank you for your public comment. So next we'll turn to, we've had our emergency business, public comment. We'll now turn to item number 4, which is Commissioner response to public comment and or other issues and remonstrance. Are there any commissioners that wish to be recognized? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. McAllister, thank you for being here this morning. The words that you said today coincident with some of the things that I was going to mention already. I'll bring it up at this point in time since you're here, and I suspect you're going to be here for a later agenda item too. And that is, you mentioned heroes in our community, and you talked about Whitebird and CSS, and you also talked about Occupy Medical. We do have heroes in our community, and you can put out another agency that you work for, which is Carry It Forward. People who are doing sometimes what seem like small things that have a tremendous impact on the individuals that they serve. And sometimes small resources can go a long way with those agencies. When we talk about Carry It Forward, it's an agency that you work for, Ms. McAllister, that goes into former homeless sites and existing homeless sites and takes the bedding, the old bedding, the soiled bedding, the old clothing, the soil clothing that has been historically taken to landfill. And they recycle it. They clean it, they fold it, they mend it, and they either return it to the original owner, which is the best case scenario, or they repurpose it with new owners. They do it on a shoestring, and they're looking for a place to live. They need a place to live, and that's something that we need to continue to keep an eye on, is where can we give them a place for warehouse space, tiny warehouse space, and also a facility to do the laundering and cleaning, because the impact that they have on the people whose lives they touch is more than we who have clean clothes. We who get up in the morning and have a running water to brush our teeth. It's more impact than we can even imagine that they have on the folks that go in. I've talked to Arwen Master Spain, and she says, well, we just put on our rubber gloves, and we go in and we take the old stuff out, stuff that hazmat crews in the past have thrown into dumpsters that they're recycling and actually reusing. So thank you for your work as a development director, Chris, for Carry It Forward. The other one I'll mention is Occupy Medical. Occupy Medical used to operate Sundays out on the park blocks, and they'd set up tents. They don't have to set up tents anymore. They do operate one afternoon a week at St. Vincent de Paul, and they serve people who otherwise would not have medical care. People with ailments that we might take for granted, but when we have them, you know, if you have a split on your toe, for instance, well, you get better, right? Well, if you have a split on your toe and your feet are never dry, it doesn't get better. So what Occupy Medical does is they take the folks with the very, very fragile people with very, what may be small medical issues as well as larger ones, and they fix them. Well, Occupy Medical needs a place to operate. They've outgrown the facility at St. Vincent de Paul, and at some point in the near future, we need to, as a society, as an agent, as a jurisdiction and as a county, we need to help them relocate to a place once or twice a week where they can serve people more adequately, more thoroughly, including dental care. So, Ms. McAllister, thank you for being a catalyst for what I had to say today, and thank you for being here this morning.
Okay, are there any other comments by commissioners? Commissioner Buck?
I just wanted to appreciate both of you coming in and Sarah for letting us know what other partners in the industry are thinking regarding our discussion tomorrow. I look forward to getting to know more about it and reading your letter. So thank you so much for coming in. And for Chris, thank you for being persistent. You know, we have all these plans to implement the TAC report, and it's hard because right now there's no groundbreaking at the moment, but hard work is actually being done from an organizational level, but that's really hard for the public to see. But it's there, it's happening. But what I'm also hearing is that it's not enough. And we need to continue to push the subject forward, talk about winterizing strategies now, which I think is on upcoming agenda items very soon. And you know, the summer is always the best time to think about what we need to do for the winter. So I look forward to those discussions as well and making sure that we have a solid plan for the upcoming winter. Thank you for coming.
Okay, Commissioner Bernie?
I'd like to echo Commissioner Buck's statements. Thanks for providing input on the Southern Willamette Forest Collaborative. I appreciate that as we go into tomorrow. Here's my sense, generally speaking. No matter how good or bad the programs to respond to some of the needs that you mentioned, Chris, it feels like demand is outpacing supply. And it feels like demand, if I'm hearing correctly and sensing, that the need on the ground for services, people literally crying out and not being heard by others, is a problem. And we will never have enough money to fix the problem with the service structure we currently operate with, no matter how heroic they are. So I want the board to know that I've really been grappling with this because I'm hearing this from several of the programs that we operate, whether it's community outreach or whether it's the reality of public input on certain things. And I don't have any answers, but I want you to know, I want the board to know that over the next few months, now that I've become acquainted with the budget cycle of the county, I'm really going to be wanting to work with everyone on some kind of a formal process where we can really mobilize neighbors helping neighbors. It seems to be a theme that comes up consistently. I don't have any answers yet, but I do know that I'm looking at model programs that are empowering unemployed and underemployed people in communities with information and knowledge of the resources and services that exist, that are feeding people and navigating the social service network on behalf of them and giving them some money and respect along the way. So I appreciate your plea and your call on behalf of so many, and I want you to know that I hear it and that I'm just trying to develop actual tangible proposals for responding on the ground. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, and thank you, Chris, for coming in. Just so you know, the county is in contact with Vanita over that couple that's camping out there. Hopefully we'll get a resolution, the one we discussed in my office. I want to note why I pulled that one item off the consent agenda so I could have an opportunity to vote against it. It's the Budget Committee and the board decided to add in a bunch of funds to fund commissioner's assistants, something that helped me actually get elected back in 2010 when the board attempted to add commissioner assistants at the same time we were cutting jail beds. It's over $200,000 added to our budget. That could fund a resident deputy in the McKenzie area, or it could fund some of this emergency work for the homeless. I took $6,000 last week of my increase and gave it to Stand Down to help. I just feel this is a use of funds that's really about hiring political cronies to help incumbents stay elected. And it's an unfair use of public money to assist incumbents, and I really believe it's a misuse of funds, and that's one of the reasons why I pulled it. But I am using some of my funds to help with the issues that you bring up, and I'm hoping we can find some innovative solutions. Like I said, I'm still puzzling over where we can park RVs and how we can do that in a safe and sanitary manner and provide both the full hookups that really you need to have to do that safely. And I'm hoping I can figure out a way to solve that, because I think that's a little piece of the puzzle that will really help some of those folks that are on the edge of being completely, homeless and tent bound versus, if they still have an RV, they've got some security over their possessions and some security and control over their world. But if they have to move every night because they're worried about getting a ticket and end up with getting tickets and end up getting an impound, it makes things worse. So really appreciate your advocacy, Chris.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Let me just say that regarding our work session tomorrow, thanks so much for coming today and giving public input and providing the letter. I'm really looking forward to this work session, because I think that sometimes some of these innovative programs to get away from the sort of binary massive cut on federal lands versus no cut on federal lands, that these kind of restoration opportunities, put people to work, and they restore the land. And I think that, people out there who are working on these things really deserve the support of local governments in the areas where it's happening and where that local government. So thank you for coming in. With regard to the problems associated with people that don't have places to go and homeless, I guess I've taken a view that really there's so many good people out there doing good things, but they're being totally stressed. They don't have enough resources. And what I mean by resources, I mean money. They don't have enough money because the people that are donating to these causes are being so overwhelmed with requests that they can't even keep up. The people that are doing the work can't raise enough money. And so there is a public role, either a city government like the city of Springfield, city of Eugene, or there's a county government or even federal or state government. But since we're talking locally, I think we need to figure out what the taxpayer is willing to pay to try to do something about these problems. And in that respect, I'm in favor of some big picture ideas like the Housing First model that we are attempting to implement without really enough money. We're attempting to implement, but without enough money. Or housing bonding authority. The legislature has given us authority to sell bonds if our voters approve. So that's back to public support for it. But if we don't get more money into these nonprofit groups, and let's face it, a group like Occupy Medical, it just started as a result of a political controversy and then morphed into a real first-rate social service organization. They are doing this on a total shoestring with almost no real financial support. If we were able to get taxpayer support for money that could go into proven nonprofits that have a proven record, then we would be actually pushing things forward and doing some good for people. So I'm in favor of this board commissioning polling on whether or not people are willing to support a $50 million housing bond or other social services. And our creative folks at Health and Human Services, and Ms. Gaffney's here watching the proceedings, the bright people over there who are well aware of what is working and not working in other communities. It seems to me that if we were to advance our work in terms of trying to figure out what is the appropriate level of taxation, because we're talking about taxes to support these social services, and more than the current taxes. In other words, the argument that we should, quote, do more with less is not going to cut it, in my view. Do more with less. No, it's do more with more. And the board may or may not agree with me on this, but I've seen this now for a lengthy period of time. And in my view is we do need to plan for a bond, plan for a social service funding package that will actually result in us doing something rather than chasing our tails and saying we'd like to see something improve. So that's my view. Okay, we're now ready to move to item 5, our consent calendar. We have 2 items that have been taken off the consent calendar. That's items 5A2 and 5A3. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar without 5A2 and 5A3.
I'll move approval of our item 5, our consent calendar, with the exception of A2 and A3.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve the consent calendar without items 5A, 5A2, and 5A3. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And with regard to item 5A2, Commissioner Burney, you wanted to make some remarks.
Yeah, I'm going to vote for this. My remarks were simply to use this to ask the question. My understanding is that the hacking of election systems across this country is focused at counties. I'm not saying that's correct. That's my understanding. And I just, my guess is since we do paper ballots, we're good, but I don't know that. I just wanted to ask, use this as an opportunity to ask what we have in place in Lane County to protect at least our county from hacking in future elections.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Berney, thank you very much for this opportunity. We've actually talked about holding a work session later this summer, early fall, on ballot security, election security, and you will have the county clerk before you who can update you on what's happening nationally, as well as the pretty impressive work here in the state of Oregon. You're absolutely right that the hacking that's occurred has been happening by and large at specific locales. Oregon, with its vote by mail, continues to be rated as one of the most secure ways United States voters can vote, but really look forward to having a work session on this very topic.
Thank you very much. That was all, I'm sorry.
No, that's-
That was all I had. I'm also going to recommend, if anyone has a chance, to take a look at the movie The Great Hack. Fascinating new Netflix documentary. But thank you very much, Greg. That sounds like you're ahead of me, on top of it. I just wanted to ask.
Commissioner Farr?
Actually, I wasn't going to pull the item for this, but I was going to mention that each one of us spent time at Lane County elections in preparation for the May election, and we know that there was a particularly heavy workload in elections. I had a chance to see the sorting system that's in place right now and how fragile it is. This is giving, in some cases, a little bit of redundancy, but you need redundancy. Because if it goes down and you have no backup, then we really go back to a manual system. So I'm in favor of it. Wasn't going to pull it for any particular reason, but since Commissioner Berney did, thank you for bringing this. Is redundancy the right word?
Commissioner Sorensen, Commissioner Farr, absolutely. Redundancy is the primary motivating impetus for acquiring the second sorter.
Well, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
And thank you for the tour of elections.
Given that, if I may move approval of consent calendar item 5A2, order 19-07-30-01, I so move.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Berney, seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve the order as presented. Further discussion? I just want to ask, is there a video that is currently on the website? I know I've seen a video in the past, but I don't remember what the current status of the sort of, here's how elections work in Lane County. Is that up and running, or what's the status of that?
Chair Sorensen, I hear from Devin Ashbridge that we've certainly had that in the past. I haven't checked it in recent weeks, but it sounds as if the link still exists and up and available.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
answer
that'd be
is yes.
great. And then if there are any changes before the election process of next year, I think it'd be helpful to promote the existence of the video, or if it's changed, then promote the change in the video to show people maybe that we bought this new Apex sorter, something like that. So that's just a request that we keep this idea present. And then one other idea, and that is that the people that have been elected to the Republican and Democratic precinct positions, since they're very political people in our community and people ask them about elections, is it possible to invite them on a tour of the elections office prior to, or if there is such a thing as a downtime in the elections business, maybe in November of 2019, some kind of pre-election, pre-big election tour for people that are precinct people? And other political parties too, not just two big ones.
The short answer is yes. It's one of the things the county clerk has been looking at. It's certainly easier to have those operational tours a ways away from, as you said, the downtime, a ways away from the election. But of course, there are observers that are there throughout the balloting, the ballot counting process. So there's lots of ways that community members can become better informed, and certainly for those who have a role in ensuring fair and timely, precise elections, we can get them in and have them see what's going on. And I'll make sure that the county clerk, Cheryl Betchart, addresses that issue when she has that work session with you.
Okay. Thank you so much. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0, and the order is approved unanimously by the board. Okay, next up is item 5A3, Order 19-07-30-02, in the matter of adding 0.50 full-time equivalent for a temporary office support assistant position in General Fund 124 within the Department of County Administration. And this item's been pulled at the request of Commissioner Bozovich for a separate vote. I understand he's voting no, so could I get a motion to approve?
I'll move approval of consent calendar item 5A3, order number 19-07-30-02 as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Okay, moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve the order as presented. And Commissioner Bozovich, you'd like to be heard on this.
Thank you. We just talked about fair elections and all that, and one of the complaints about election process in America is the power of incumbency and the ability to use public funds to hire staff. And I'll be interested to have folks maybe look later at who hires what kind of staff, whether they're politically connected staff and former campaign staff, or whether it's somebody that's purely an office assistant that's helping in an office. But I believe this is part of the problem of why incumbency is so powerful. I also believe that this is not a proper use of public funds when we have so many other places that are higher priorities. I also just feel that this is a step in the wrong direction for the board to keep going down this need for assistance when there actually is nothing in Lane County Charter that even has an office being provided to a commissioner. But there is something in Lane County Charter about being a full-time commissioner. And I'll be interested to see if the one commissioner that's still practicing law hires somebody to help him do his job while he's practicing law.
Okay, other comments?
I just want to speak to this because this was one of the items that I brought forward in previous weeks. When we made the decision during the budget administrative cycle, each commissioners originally began with $4,000 each. And the increase was up to $15,000 each, so a delta of $11,000 per commissioner for a total of $55,000, not over $200,000. So we have a delta of change in the budget for $55,000.
My apologies.
Meaning each of us is $15,000 towards assistant, which is an extremely nominal amount and not a full-time person, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 hours for this particular assistant. And it's my understanding that the rules in which we hire this particular person is that they cannot be tied to any particular person's political campaign. They should be for assistant duties. And that's what I intend to do with this particular assistant that I want to do. If I want to have to help serve the community. And if other commissioners feel like they're doing the very best for their community with the resources that they have, I completely support that. I have a huge district, the largest of all, and it takes a great distance and effort to get everywhere, and I'm only one human being. So it would be very helpful to have somebody do some of the more administrative duties so that free me up to be out in the community. I feel like it's a shame that the community pays the commissioners the wages that we have for doing things that we know could be done by clerical staff. So that is the reason that I have brought this forward, and I'm asking for your support.
Okay, any other comments? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Buck and Commissioner Bozevich. I supported this during the budget process for a number of reasons. One is that it was kind of a scaled-down version of the original intent, which potentially had one full-time equivalent to be shared among commissioners, and I didn't see a practical way of doing that. This seemed to me a good alternative that can be administered quite fairly, in that each commissioner administers their own budget. Historically, I don't spend my $4,000. I give the $4,000 either back to the county or this year I gave $1,500 to carry it forward. So so how we spend our own money is we do that the way that we wish to do it. My geographic district, I can walk in an afternoon. Yours, you couldn't drive in an afternoon, really. So, I mean, there are different ways that different people will approach it. And I understand Commissioner Bozevich's concerns, and I think and hope and expect that Mr. Dingell's rules that have been put forward will help to guard us against any improper use of the staff that is hired, or however the $15,000 is used. But I support it in the budget process for a number of reasons. I'm going to support it today for basically the same reasons I outlined in the budget process.
I don't want to be too redundant, but one thing I've learned is there are 5 commissioners, and each commissioner is independent and unique and operates, I believe, as best they can in all sincerity. I think that people know my huge respect for Commissioner Bozevich, and I want to tell you, I never want to be on an opposite side of an issue, but I am on this one. He already, I don't know if people heard, but when Heather pointed out that this was a $55,000 difference, I heard Commissioner Bozevich say, "You're right." Correct? That was incorrect math?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was remembering a $41,000 difference between the $4,000 budget and the $55,000, and timesing it by 5, which was incorrect math in my head. And I
Let it be
apologize.
known, Jay Bozevich actually made a mistake. And actually, my understanding is that this is less money than it was originally proposed, as you had mentioned, Commissioner Farr, in order to try and resolve the same issue. So, number one. Number two, the person requesting this now is anything but an incumbent. And so I really, I don't know how I'm going to approach this. I know I need support. I know it's a marginally poor use of my time to constantly be doing calendar things. I don't see this as conflating the improper use of a meager resource compared to the 2 full-time equivalents each member of the Board of Commissioners had in the good old days. I'm talking 80s now and that time. So I just want to say I don't see this as a controversial issue, and I absolutely support, within the confines of the approved budget, any approach that a commissioner feels they need to support them doing their job. And honestly, I think constituent service is a huge thing, and it seems to be in some ways undervalued in our county budget. So I'll approve this. I mean, I'll vote for that.
I just want to say that when the larger counties in Oregon, like Lane County, had, as Commissioner Bernie just mentioned, 2 full-time assistants for each of the 5 commissioners. And during the Great Recession, and even before that, those were eliminated. It does have an impact on whether or not the commissioners are able to keep up with their work. And I didn't play any role in the presentation of this idea in the budget or even at the Budget Committee. But I think that it is recognizing that the commissioner districts all have their unique challenges, and in particular, the East Lane District being the largest of the districts. That's one of the reasons why you're hearing the support from the East Lane Commissioner. My own view is that when governments don't act to help people, when they are unable or refusing to help people because of the fact that commissioners aren't returning phone calls, aren't returning email, aren't going to community events, then that reflects poorly on the entire organization. And I'm hoping that that this change will allow a better level of response. Now, some may argue, well, that's just to protect the incumbency. That's just to make sure that the commissioner that does a good job gets reelected. And quite frankly, I don't think that's a bad thing, that people that do a good job are reelected. I think we've had quite a few incumbents lose on this board, and I think part of the reason, and this is certainly multi-partisan, is that they just don't have enough resources to get the job done. And that's one of the reasons why in this last cycle, we had 2 incumbents removed and 2 new challengers come in. And unless we make some changes, we may suffer that again. I view that as bad for the organization to have that kind of upheaval. Certainly well within the power of the voters to remove people when they don't think they're doing a good job. And I don't find any big fault with that system, but what I do think is that when you see it systemically, and other counties, Marion County is often viewed as our most comparable county, you know, they do have 2 full-time assistants for their commissioners. So I don't think this modest proposal or addition is that big of a thing. I do appreciate all sides in this discussion, but I come down on the side of voting for it. So further, I see no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
No.
Motion carries 4-1. Commissioner Vosich voting no. Board order is adopted. Okay, now we are looking at our time certain at 10 a.m. So I would like to, and we have a 1 hour, approximately 1 hour program on our non-cannabis prevention for youth. And so Ms. Gaffney, could you come up on order 6B 19-07-30-09? That's the order in the matter of approving certain contracts and amendments and delegating authority to the county administrator to approve contracts and amendments. We set this up as a 10-minute item, and we have about 15 minutes, so very timely.
Okay. Good morning, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. This item is fairly routine. The reason this is not our item, sorry. This item is fairly routine because we're authorizing contracts. The reason it's not on the consent calendar is our agreement that anytime there's a new contract or new amendment, that we would provide the opportunity to talk about that. So you have in front of you in the packet a list of contracts, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of those. One I might lift up for you. As you look through the list of new contracts, we do have a proposed contract with Pacific Source on here, which is in anticipation of their securing a contract with the Health Authority as a coordinated care organization in Lane County, and that would secure Lane County as a provider of clinical services at the community health centers and behavioral health in the event that they complete what we anticipate will be a process to become a CCO. So that is one of the new contracts. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions about any of those contracts that you might have.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Gaffney on the matter of approving various contracts and amendments? And Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have in the past declared a potential conflict of interest because my wife does work for one of our partner CCO agencies, which is Trillium. And I don't see anything in here where the county is actually providing money to Trillium or in any way affecting things in which my wife would be affected only by me, I think, only as in my role as a county commissioner. So I don't see a statutory conflict of interest. I will take part in this discussion.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve this order?
I'll move approval of item 6B, order 19-07-30-09,
Okay,
as presented.
okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, second by Commissioner Bozovich to approve Order 19-07-30-09 as presented. Further questions or comments by commissioners?
Just a quick comment. This is an item that the public should take time to read a little bit. If you look at the services being provided under these contracts, as people like Chris come in and ask us to provide, a helping hand, this includes, residential treatment services and addiction services and, medical services for the underserved. This is a huge amount, and we're not talking about little dollars here. 360,000, 500,000, 300,000, 190,000, 6 million, 160,000, 500,000, almost 800,000. It goes on. That we're providing through our Health and Human Services. Quite often, yes, the funding's coming from the state or the federal government, but we are doing a lot in Lane County to assist folks that need help. And it's so sometimes people hear public comment and it sounds like we're not doing anything. They're just asking us to do more than we're already doing. But if you read through these contracts, it's hard not to recognize the fact that we're already doing a lot. And I just want to thank our H&H staff for the way they leverage some of the funds they get.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I just want to underscore what Commissioner Bozovich said on both counts. We're doing a lot. We all want to do more. We have to operate within our means, and I continue to be impressed with your work.
Okay, Commissioner Farr?
Much of the same. However, I will state that, we spoke a little bit earlier in response to Mr. McAllister about the things that we're not doing and the things that we could do if we had more money and the groundbreaking that we're not doing. But a reminder that very soon, if I hold my breath, it might happen before I exhale. We'll be breaking ground on a 51-bed facility on MLK Boulevard, which is a housing first facility, the first of its type in the region, that really will be groundbreaking and will provide a flagship, and hopefully, and I expect will be catalytic in our use of funds, greater use of existing funds and seeking additional funds to provide housing first, which has proven, and we are demonstrating that it is an effective way to work with the broader mass of homeless folks who are suffering from behavioral health issues. So thank you for all that you do. I'm just one more voice that echoing what has already been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. I appreciate that. I think I might have undersold this packet a little bit in my presentation, and I appreciate you lifting that back up. And we are doing a lot, and there is much more that we're excited to do. And I think over the next several months, we'll be talking with you a lot about those additional strategies.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. The order is adopted. All commissioners voting in the affirmative. Thank you so much. And Mr. Dingle, I know you're here, and is it possible you could do your Free Speech Plaza update before our 10 o'clock time certain?
It is, Chair Sorensen. Mr. Mokrahajski sent me a text. So real quickly, you should have also got some information that I received this morning regarding our executive session, so you may want to check that. I forwarded it to you, I think, about a half an hour ago. This is a response to a board assignment, basically updating some issues surrounding the Free Speech Plaza and the adjoining areas. I sent you some time ago a link to a a rather lengthy board session that we had that led to essentially the curfew that is currently in place and has been in place for a number of years. Want to confirm with the board that the restriction that is in, or the curfew that's in place has been there. Up until very recently, no one has ever challenged it. In my opinion, it's fine. It's non-content related. There is a legal matter working its way through the city municipal court where that issue is going to be directly resolved by the court. I think the hearing is either September 5th or 6th. If anybody wants the materials, the city attorney has forwarded those materials to me, and I can send them on. I'll tell you, they're quite voluminous. They're back and forth. It would be demur, a response to the demur, and a reply to the response. But if you want that, just let me know and I'll send it. The second thing is, I know there's been some discussion about some of the rules that were recently adopted. This is part of our agreement with the city on the development of the town square. There has been some confusion about this, and actually when I met with the city attorney to see how it was going last week, a lot of the issues have been resolved just because it was new. But I want to emphasize that the concerns you hear about the downtown activity zone rules only apply on Saturdays during the time of year where the market's in place. And all it does is involves commercial sales. And the permit is only $25 for the entire year. So I know there was some confusion surrounding that. I wanted to make sure that the board understood the very limited nature of it. There are a number of other issues that were primarily related to safety. One of the things that the city agreed to do was allow 6-foot umbrellas. This was somewhat, I don't know why, but it was very controversial. They allowed to do it just for your reference. This is the size of your typical patio umbrella. The final thing is there was some concern about, again, it was safety related with regard to cabanas. That's been worked out where people were, I think we've created some things where if people don't bring something to secure it, that we have the means to do that. And that is, again, strictly a safety issue because there was a situation, I think it was last year, when these cabanas get blown, if it's windy and they get blown, they can actually injure people pretty seriously. We'd be responsible for that. So that's really all I have on that issue, unless you have specific questions. And again, let me know if you want to know, if you want the materials and the date for that hearing, because I can forward it.
Now, is there a work session on lifting the time of day component to the just the Free Speech Plaza itself? Is that still in progress?
As I understand it, this was intended to fulfill the thing. So I guess if you were going to have a work session on actually removing the curfew, that would be a new assignment.
Yeah, okay. Very
And
good.
my advice would be, if you're going to do that, would be to wait and see what happens with the municipal court. In other words, have a decision from the municipal court on that issue ahead of any work session.
Ahead of?
I'm sorry. Yeah, have the decision from the court before you have the work
Okay,
session.
very good. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, any questions for Mr. Dingell on his report? Okay, thank you very much. And we're about 6 minutes out from our time certain, so I'll call on Mr. Mokrahajski under item 7A, County Administration Announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things. There's an email sent to the board from Congressman DeFazio's office regarding the Governor's Commission on Senior Services, and I just wanted to bring this to the board's attention. There's a request for a commissioner to participate in that effort. This is a state-based commission that advises Governor Brown on the needs of seniors in the state, and they're hosting a meeting in Eugene on October 10th. Congressman DeFazio's office is hoping that one of the commissioners will be available to attend and speak about the board's efforts to help seniors. So they're still planning the logistics of that meeting, but I just wanted to call that out for the board potentially to discuss during your commissioner business items. And then one other item, Mr. Chair, I want to bring to the board's attention that I think some commissioners have received some inquiry about this. It was brought to our attention, my attention, by Mo Young, our Equity and Access Coordinator. Mo has been in contact with the Lane County Fair staff, but there was an incident, as we understand, that occurred at the fair on Sunday related to some youth and adults, and the individuals were all removed from the fair because of an altercation that occurred. And so Mo and Corey Buller are in communication, and our fair staff is looking into what exactly transpired there. It's important to note that the security staff at the fairgrounds is an outside third-party contractor that is DPSST certified. They've typically, as we understand it, handled situations appropriately, but our staff will be looking into how they handled this situation. Fair staff was not aware of the situation until it was reported to us yesterday. And so they're looking into that again to see what exactly happened and determine whether or not that's an issue that needs to be addressed in terms of the contract with that security organization. So we'll follow up with additional information as that becomes available. I just wanted you to know that that both our Equity and Access staff and Fair staff are working together to understand what happened there and resolve any concerns. And that's all I have for the time being.
A community member called me and said a white male patron of the fair came up to a teenager and said, why don't you go back to where you came from? And that's what provoked all this. Is that the same incident, or is there another incident?
I believe that's the same incident. I wasn't told that that was exactly, those were the words that were used, but that what's been reported is that, I should say on Saturday, it looks like what we're told, a 13-year-old individual of color was targeted by a white adult male in their 30s. The adult and the 13-year-old and the 13-year-old's friends who were attempting to intervene in that situation were all kicked out of the fair by the security. And so that's the question that we're seeking to resolve. And
Do we know why the victim was kicked out of the fair?
Trying to understand.
Okay.
We don't. So again, the security is a third-party security contractor that is DPSST certified, but we're getting, the fairgrounds staff is getting was not aware of what had happened, or if there's a breakdown in their process. So it sounds like there is typically a process for how a situation like this would be handled. But they're reviewing the actions carefully, and they're going to determine whether or not the security agency acted appropriately or not, and then take appropriate action depending on that. Our fair director, has stated that we promote the fair as a family-friendly, respectful environment, and we take the issue seriously. And so we will be following up on that.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. And very briefly, we have a 10 o'clock coming up very quickly, but at 9 o'clock the following day, each day, the members of the Fair Board and staff meet to view the actions of the previous day. This happened on Sunday, so that meeting didn't occur. The Fair Board will be meeting on Thursday of this week, but they typically do review any incidents that may have happened, and this isolated incident happened on Sunday. And, we all spend time at the fair, a great deal of time at the fair, and I will state that generally speaking, the fair was just a absolutely marvelous experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I attended with my 2 Latinx grandbabies and 3 Latinx cousins who were visiting from Tucson, and we had a wonderful time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was there with my family on Saturday, and I thank you. There were conflicts in the reports we heard about whether it was Saturday or Sunday. I originally heard that it was Sunday as well, and you're right, it wouldn't have come up at a briefing, although I don't know if the staff does a briefing on Monday morning after the fair.
I wasn't there if they did.
Yeah.
So.
I was there on Saturday with my family, and attendance was really great and generally a positive attitude, but situations like this, that occur are obviously concerning to us and something that we take very seriously, and want to make sure that the fair remains a family-friendly, inclusive, supportive, enjoyable experience for everyone who attends those. So we will be following up and share more information as we resolve that incident.
Just one quick comment, and that is that in the volatile world that we seem to live in, the fact that this is one incident which we're going to check out thoroughly in the context of a very successful event, I don't think we should lose sight of that either. While we seek justice, we also should celebrate the success that we experienced.
Okay. All right, so at this time, I'd like to call up our 10 o'clock time certain, and we have a number of people here to fit in at the table and other people in the front row. So at this time, I will read the item, and people can get situated during the lengthy title of this item. 6A, Order 19-07-30-08, in the matter of accepting a report back on the use of the Armory building and giving direction to staff regarding options related to the use of the Armory and relocation of the Lane County Health and Human Services Developmental Disabilities Services Division. With us to discuss this morning is Karen Gaffney, Director of the Department of the Lane County Department of Health and Human Services, Bill Sider, Senior Architect with Pivot Architecture, Carla Tazumal, Developmental Disabilities Manager of the Lane County Department of Health and Human Services, Mike Penwell, Capital Improvement Plan Manager with Lane County Public Works. We set this up for a 15-minute presentation and lots of time for discussion thereafter. So at this time, I'll welcome Ms. Gaffney, and you can introduce the people here.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. You have done the introductions, so I won't take time to run through that again. We do have a 15-minute presentation for you this morning and intentionally set aside significant time to have the conversation with you. I just want to tee this up briefly. While I undersold the prior item, this item I was very excited to be able to talk with you about this morning. In addition to those of us at the table, I want to acknowledge Sean Wade, our Administrative Services Manager, and Lisa Nichols, our Quality and Compliance Manager, who are also part of our internal team that's been working on this project. It really is a fantastic opportunity for us today to talk to you about how we could do things so much better for our clients, some of our most vulnerable clients in the community, and for the larger community as a whole. We have a vision for a shared campus of services on our MLK property that would include primary care, youth services, our MLK school, mental health, and developmental disabilities as this project moves forward. So I'm going to stop there. Carla's going to talk some about the need and services in particular, and Bill will spend a significant period of time talking to you about our options, and then we'll be open for questions. So, Carla?
Thank you. So Developmental Disability Services provide services to a broad range of individuals, ranging from birth through death. The majority of the individuals we provide services for are individuals who are in case management. And right now we're serving over 2,500 individuals through case management. And so that is the primary population we serve. We've seen a significant increase in the number of individuals served over the last 5 years. We've added over 1,000 people to services. Along with the additional individuals means we're providing services also to providers who support those individuals. So these additional providers are also visiting our office. And as a result, we have a significant need in terms of lobby space, in terms of conference rooms, in addition to the seating that we've added as a result of the significant number of staff, which is over 85% increase in staffing since 2014. The benefit to this increase in services and people served is that we have steadily received increased funding, which has allowed us to hire additional staff. And this year we received 31% more funding available from DHS. All of our funding comes from DHS via Medicaid dollars. We don't receive any county general fund at this time. And this, this slide here is just a visual representation of the staggering increase that we've seen over the last 5 years in the number of individuals served. And at this time, there's nothing to indicate that this is really slowing down.
Hey, Bill.
Bill.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about some architectural issues and some of the plans that we have for you to share with you to help you make a decision on how to go forward. We started working on the project. Developmental disabilities is on the lower level of the public service building, and to accommodate the growth that you just saw there, we were going to expand their offices to the vacant space on the west side of that lower level of the public service building. We came up with a plan, and we're well into that process when the idea came up to reuse the Armory building, to repurpose the Armory building, which has been vacant for many years, to serve the needs of developmental disabilities and quality and compliance. And so, whereas the remodel downstairs was pretty simple, just repeat what was down there and just expand into the vacant space. Looking at a new building, renovating the Armory, led us to come up with a different approach of understanding what the project goals would be in that larger project. So some of the key, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
you were
back.
back, you were on the right
Go
side
back
of
to
goals.
there, yeah,
I'm sorry, am I going back?
one there. So, we knew the building, the program had to be supportive of the clients that developmental disability serves. Need to be inviting and accessible, easy to get to, but also easy to maintain, resilient, flexible, and economical. So one of the options was to remodel the lower level of the public service building. And if you go to the next slide, so the area on the left of the red dash line would be the area that they would grow into. But we also talked about renovating the front lobby of the space to accommodate the larger population that they're serving and their program. And then we looked at the Armory. So this is a site plan of the Surbu campus. The Armory building, the existing Armory building, actually, could you go to the next slide, please? The existing Armory building is shown dashed there, and a new building in that place is shown in the gray box. So you can see the position of the building there. And then we can come back to the site plan if you have any questions about how that lays on the site. But in the interest of time, let's talk about the next two options for moving out to the Surbu campus site. So hopefully you're familiar with the Armory building. It was built in the 70s as a National Guard Armory. They used it for drilling, for training. The large area that pops up at the top there is a big assembly hall that they use for drilling and ceremonies when the company went off, and then ceremonies when the company came back. Mostly it was a storage building. It was a storage for the unit equipment and some offices and a couple of classrooms that they used. The Armory, so this was the plan. That's fine. Yeah, go ahead. So this was a way of accommodating the program in that building. The assembly space allowed us to put a large meeting room in there. We had office spaces, client conference rooms, much the same program that was going to go downstairs, just in a different configuration, but all within the confines of the bearing walls that building has and the columns and the construction there. So while we were looking at that, we said, as long as we're looking at remodeling the Armory, why don't we look at what a new building would provide on the same site? Yeah, okay, we can come back. That's fine. So we came up with a plan to do a two-story building on the site to accommodate all of the developmental disabilities' current needs and a little bit of growth space and quality and compliance needs as well, and provide client services in conference rooms, training room, and then the ability to expand to add a large meeting room off to the left-hand side of the plan there. All the offices, most of the offices would be on the upstairs, all the client services would be on the downstairs, so it's easy to get to. And before you go to the next slide, let me go back a step. The Armory, the existing Armory building currently sits below the floodplain. And so in order to remodel the Armory, we need to flood-proof the building. And flood-proofing the building it involves some structural issues because the building's a concrete building, and our engineers said that when the flood comes, and there's going to be 3 feet of water around the building, according to the FEMA, the building's going to float. And because it's a concrete box, it's a concrete boat. And so as amazing as that sounds, when you have to flood-proof a building, you need to not not only keep the water out, but also keep the building heavy enough so that it doesn't float. So that involved a lot of money. It's about $1.2 million to flood-proof the building before we do anything else to it. So with that kind of baseline there, I wanted to show you just some comparison of key decision factors we hope would help you decide whether to select option 1, which would stay here and remodel the building downstairs, option 2, which would be to remodel the Armory building, and option 3, which would be to build a new building in its place and to take the Armory building down. The new building would be 2 floors. Both in option 2 and 3, there's existing on-site parking that we would retain, which is an advantage there. Getting right to the construction cost, our estimates to do the construction part of the work for remodeling the area downstairs in the public service building is $1.3 million, rounding up here. To remodel the Armory would be about $10 million, and that includes $1.2 million to flood-proof it. And then option 3, to build a new building, would be $11.5 million. And these are escalated costs out 2 years when construction would start, based on some very preliminary numbers there. And then total project costs, because those numbers are the construction costs, the total project costs include fees and permits and system development charges and things like that. So you can see the project cost downstairs is $1.6.5 million. The option 2 to remodel the Armory is about $12.7 million, and then option 3 is $14.7 million to build a new building. So it's not a whole lot more money to build a new building, and we'll talk about the advantages of that in a minute. Option 3, the new building would provide 121 workspaces, offices, and cubicle areas. There's meeting rooms that are accommodated in the program. There's staff support spaces. Option 3 provides a little bit of expansion space inside that building to accommodate the next 5 years of growth that Carla talked about earlier. Option 2 really doesn't provide a whole lot of extra expansion space, and option 1 doesn't provide any expansion space. We're filling up the lower level of the public service building, and there's no room to grow after that. Option 3 doesn't have to deal with floodplain issues because we would raise the building up above the base flood elevation, much like the youth services building is and the behavioral health services building is. And then with option 2 or 3, you free up 22,000 square feet of space in the public service building, lower level, for another county use when this is all done. So with all of that considered, we felt that option 3 was the one that we would like to recommend that you do for the following reasons. The new building would be specifically designed to accommodate the program requirements of development disabilities and quality and compliance. It would be, that site out there provides better client services. It's easy to get to. There's parking. It's at grade. When people come to the building, you don't have to figure out where to go down into the lower level. As I said, it would be above the floodplain. Excuse me, the new building would be energy efficient and sustainable and resilient. We can incorporate solar collection systems on the roof if that's what you'd like to do. We could maximize the use of available land on the campus because that building has a smaller footprint, so we could allow space for that building to grow or for the adjacent MLK school to grow. And the building would be designed for future flexibility. As the program changes, as Health and Human Services has other needs for space in that building, the building would be more adaptable than the existing Armory is, just due to the nature of the number of bearing walls it has. And as I mentioned, designed for future expansion. Some of the other things to talk about, just thinking about other things which weren't included in that cost estimate. The large assembly space is something that the county and Health and Human Services doesn't really have a room almost this size to accommodate big groups of staff for all staff meetings. We can incorporate cross-laminated timber. It's about a $500,000 or $600,000 add-on to do that. But if that's something that you'd like to explore, we could certainly do that. And there's room on the site for additional parking to accommodate large meetings that you have or increase client growth. And so that's the end of my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer questions when we're done here. So.
We are almost to the end of the slides. A couple pieces as we start to look toward next steps. The first thing I want to clarify, even though the packet talks about an order. There is no order today. Really, the idea is to get direction from you about which of these options you would like us to pursue, and then we will come back to you with more specific information about financing and an order at that time. So I'm sorry if there was any confusion in the packet. I wanted to clarify that up front. A couple things as we look toward next steps, and I'm going to address these pieces first and then just try and summarize a little bit before I turn it back to Chair Sorensen for discussion. A natural question you might pose is, how will this be paid for? So we wanted to at least talk a little bit about that, but as I said, we'll come back to you with more refined information once we're informed by your discussion. Option number 3 is the option, in addition to the recommendation that came to us from Pivot, it is the recommendation that the department is bringing forward. So that's a roughly $14.7 million project that would need to be financed. We do, in developmental disabilities, have some cash reserves that we could put towards this project. And as we think about a financing plan, it's with the idea that approximately $10 million of the financing would be borrowed, and the concept would be to look at a joint payback of that, some of that being paid directly by the department and the Developmental Disability Services Division, and then also looking at county support for that, similar to how the Charlton building was purchased, with some of the funding for that coming from general county resources and some from department revenues. It is that opportunity, as Carla mentioned, in Lane County, we haven't had the ability to provide ongoing general fund support to operations of developmental disabilities, which some other counties have been able to do, and this is an opportunity for that support from the larger organization for the building. And in terms of timing, if we were to move forward, we would estimate that it's from the time that we get a final decision from the board to proceed, it would be about 2.5 years to completion. And the details are there on the slide. Clearly, that clock doesn't start ticking until we come back to you with more detailed information and you make a decision to direct us going forward. Before I turn it back for questions and discussion, I did want to circle back to really the vision and the opportunity that this provides for the county, not only for the clients who use developmental disabilities services, or even the clients who use health and human services and would appreciate that campus feel. As Bill talked about, the option to locate developmental disabilities out on the MLK campus provides an opportunity for the larger organization to think about highest best use of the space here in the public service building. I think we have mentioned during our budget hearings and other discussions that it's challenging for our clients who need that direct service to navigate this building, to navigate downtown parking. It's been challenging for years. However, if that space were to open up, I know there have been conversations with Mike Penwell and the county administrator about elections being an opportunity to really bring back into this building those general purpose services and co-locate those. So there would be space to bring elections into this building, and I'd like to, down the line, if we're talking about financing, we can think about what the opportunities might be that come from that as well. Our hope is that as you move through discussion of these options, that there is an opportunity to really look at a way to create a quadruple win, a win for our clients who really need access to services and our employees who are outstripping the space in this building very quickly, provide some future growth for the operation, and then look at overall county operations. So with that, we'll turn it back to you and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very good. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions and comments up here, and I'll just kick it off by asking a question. Maybe Mr. Sider knows this or has an opinion on it. You mentioned possibility of solar on this building, and I'm really interested in with the increasing temperatures in Eugene in the summer and decreasing winter temperatures, that the whole heat pump concept that we see being developed in the Midwest, especially where there's high summer temperatures and low winter temperatures. Could we see that kind of development, and what does that do to the long-term costs of the building? I think the term I just learned was solar combo system, and that's where you have solar energy on the top and you have a heat pump on the bottom, and that gives you a longer resiliency to the building, and the costs of heating and cooling the building over time are greatly reduced.
Well, sorry, Commissioner Sorensen, I really don't have an opinion or thought, because I really don't know much about that system at all, but we can certainly find out about it.
What about just ground source, heat pump?
Yeah, those are certainly opportunities. When we did the cost estimate, we brought in a mechanical engineer and discussed mechanical systems with them, and so we had a good understanding of what the cost implications of that would be. We looked at several different options. I don't know specifically if we included ground source heat pump, but that's something we would look at later there. So.
I can speak to that a little bit. We still have a relatively mild climate in the Pacific Northwest, and the models are such that it's not quite a equal comparison to the Midwest, but heat pumping technology is certainly a way to take advantage of the more carbon neutral energy as the fuel source. And air-to-air heat pumping technology is becoming more and more efficient, even at low temperatures, and that's probably a more cost-effective way to go than ground source. Tying to solar, the economics aren't still quite there because hydro is so cheap in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a very clean source of fuel, but the 1.5% for solar is required by state statute, and then we can look at what makes sense to expand that. But yeah, certainly the more solar you have, the more resilient you are long-term, and the cleaner the energy profile.
Okay. Maybe a question for Ms. Gaffney then, high level. For 20 years, the state's been giving us more and more money each year, roughly, for these services. But if we make a substantial capital investment, are we assuming the state's going to continue to give us the money for these services?
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, that's an excellent question. The funding for developmental disabilities, as Carla mentioned, is Medicaid funding, and the service is an entitlement. And so the state really is required by law to make sure that everyone who's eligible for the service has access to the service, which is a piece of why the funding has kept pace with that. So we would anticipate that that would continue to occur. And I appreciate Bill's sense of designing the building for flexibility, because we certainly don't know 10, 20 years out what the demands would look like. Our experience in Health and Human Services has been the opportunity to really take advantage of those spaces and adapt as community needs have changed. But there certainly is no indication that there's going to be a reduction in funding.
Okay. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So first, a little bit of an editorial comment. All the charts you showed about your client growth and staff growth and revenue growth, you could flip them upside down, and that would be the charts for Pearl Buck. Where they've, since we've made this decision through the courts to basically swing a pendulum that was maybe a little bit too far over towards closed workshops all the way over to we shouldn't have any, we've basically destroyed Pearl Buck as an agency that served folks with developmental disabilities. So that is one of the drivers here is that decision. So one of the things we may think about is, as a board, supporting policies that try and find the medium, because there are people that truly blossom and actually do better in a closed workshop environment. But we've really destroyed Pearl Buck as an agency with that swing of the pendulum. Second to that, I'm a little bit leery about the whole idea of a new building or rebuilding a building for this agency, somewhat, because I look at the PSB, and I know we've got somebody leasing 10,000 square feet right now. And that agency is looking to build a building and move out in the next several years. So one of the things on your chart, no long-term expansion, we're going to have 10,000 square feet eventually. Secondary to that, we're hoping to build a new courthouse. And that new courthouse is going to free up 160,000 square feet, approximately, if we get that built and move the courts out of here, along with, jury assembly and the law library, which are in the PSB versus the courthouse. So that's the piece I didn't see mixed into this study at all. And we currently own the building elections is in, so it doesn't, we actually, we might make money selling the building if we move them, but right now we're spending money replacing the roof over there. And I know it's not the greatest building. So there's not an emergency to move elections. And I kind of think of $14 million, maybe there's better places to be spending $14 million of Lane County's money. In addition to, one of the things up there was a loan, which I don't know whether we can actually do a loan because we can't obligate future boards unless we have money set aside somewhere else that could pay that loan off. That's I think that was explained to us by our finance and legal people about 2 weeks ago. But my real concern about this is, 1.6 million, for remodel versus 14 million for a new building. And I don't want to impugn Bill at all, but it's the difference between about $100,000 in architectural fees and $1 million in architectural fees. So he might be a little bit biased in recommending a new building. I really would like to have a look at, what is the future of the PSB? What is the future of the courthouse, and how does that fit into all this? Are the timelines close enough together? As a city's looking at the whole, downtown area and the options they're putting out there, and now they own the Parkade where they want to put their City Hall Phase 1. How quickly are they going to be moving out? You mentioned an assembly area. We have this room that only gets used on Tuesdays, really. So it's like, do we need redundancy in some of those things? And I want to be careful with the people's money and deliberate about it, because $14 million is a fair amount of change. We're talking about possibly doing a $50 million bond to build affordable housing to try and leverage, other funds. That's a big delta for me. Basically, it's a times 10, going from the 1.7 up to 14. So I really want to understand how the existing PSP fits in to all of this, and it just doesn't seem like that was necessarily quite put into the lease with the city of Eugene, the possible move out of the courts, which frees up a whole bunch more square footage. Yes, I know we don't have the greatest parking here, but a lot of folks in DD use the bus system, and this has much better bus access than MLK does in a lot of ways. In fact, that building's set back so far from the bus line that a lot of the DD folks that are mobility limited would have difficulty getting from the bus stop back to the Armory building where it currently sits. So, those are issues I kind of don't have enough information about to say, go forward with a new building. Right now, I'm still at remodel this building.
Okay, Mr. Mokrahysky, and then Commissioner Burney, Buck, and Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Commissioner Bozovich brings up, I think, some really appropriate and astute comments and concerns. I want to assure the board that we really have attempted to look at the broader picture of highest and best use of properties and co-location of services in the places that can best meet the needs of the people that we're serving through those services, as well as to have similar types of services located in the appropriate places. And so when we've had the, understand there certainly are concerns about the cost You heard Ms. Gaffney talk about the benefits to developmental disabilities from the standpoint of having that service co-located with the other health and human service functions out at the SERBU campus, the parking and additional space that benefits the developmental disabilities operation. And then also, we really have had an eye towards trying to consolidate other county functions, general services, services that the general public accesses. Our feeling has been this building, the Public Services Building, really should be the customer service center for general services for county residents. This is where you come to pay your taxes, to get your, to do, whether it's property documents or transactions, marriage licenses, to ideally that we would locate elections in this building so that people can register to vote, drop off their ballot, and seek information from our elections, as well as other government services. So you're right that the plan is for the city of Eugene at some point to move out of its space. We would like to move, it has been our plan to move elections into this building and then to sell or lease the elections building to another entity. As well as ongoing conversations with, while the city of Eugene may vacate some of their offices here, they still have a lot of other operations that are located in private buildings, leased from private buildings in the downtown area. The conversations that we've had with our partners at the city of Eugene is really thinking, I mean, most residents do not make a distinction between city and county. They access the services they need to access from the government that they need to access them from. And so thinking about this building still having services that are available to the public, whether they be city or county services in this building. And then the final comment that I'd make on this is that we are in the process now of beginning to think about the next stages of a public engagement related to the courthouse project. We're going to come back to the board shortly after Labor Day to have that discussion about what the public process can look like, as well as a conversation about the reviewing the project itself and listening to the public feedback that we receive and incorporating that into adjustments to that overall project. And so I'd ask the board that as you consider these questions that have been raised, that we have this conversation in the evolving discussions around the future of the courthouse, the future of this building, and other services in the county, because we really are trying to make sure that in an environment where we have limited resources for staffing of operations, that we are placing our operations in the places where they can be most efficient, like we are with parole and probation, like we are with the methadone clinic, and like we are with developmental disabilities and elections and all these other functions. So this will be part of the ongoing conversation, but I envision that these things are going to continue to evolve and adjust, but that we have an eye towards making sure that we do have sort of a holistic picture for where operations can most efficiently and effectively be sited.
Okay, go ahead.
I really hope you're wrong. I really hope that most people can distinguish between the city of Eugene and Lane County. I also want to ask, your statement, forgive me, I'm just going to ask some questions here. Are we dependent upon the city of Eugene developing a city hall after being homeless for quite a number of years for us to plan what the county's priorities are with space such as the 10,000, if that's the number, square feet that we're renting the city of Eugene? This is just a legit question.
Yeah. No, I would say no, we're not dependent. We continue to be a good partner with the city of Eugene, as we would with any of our city partners. So that relationship has worked out well. We are in ongoing conversations as the lease with the city of Eugene is coming due. And so we're in conversations about what that will look like going forward from a temporary standpoint. So we are not dependent on the city to determine what our next steps are, but we are trying to be a good partner, understanding that, you know, we're addressing our issues here from an operational standpoint. The city is seeking to address theirs. All of those things have impacts on the community and the development of the downtown area. And My point about distinguishing between city and county, I agree with you, Commissioner. I hope that people do make that distinction.
I hope you don't mind my saying.
I think that oftentimes the public, they don't make a if they need a building permit or a permit or a license or a zoning decision or another service, they are not always thinking about the distinction between which government provides that service. They're thinking about, I need to access this service, so that we're looking at this building as a potential for consolidated services where appropriate, so that when the public is coming to get a marriage license or pay their property taxes, they may also be able to get a building permit from.
I heard you. I got you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have a bunch more questions, and these first questions that really relate to what you said, Stephen. So, in your opinion, is it better to be I don't know what well, actually, when does the City of Eugene's lease expire, current lease?
I believe this year.
Like December?
We had been on like a 3 to 5 year lease, don't quote me on that, but on a several-year lease, it is expiring, and we're in the process of having discussions on what the future will look like.
Okay. And I'm going to get to the actual proposal here, but and I also appreciate the desire for a one-stop shop for services. I get that. Is that worth $12 million in terms of, and now after this question, I'm going to get to the specifics of the option, just my question. But in your opinion, it seems like that was part of the justification with a bunch of moving targets. So is the value here worth that, so that this building can fulfill your sense or our sense of a one-stop shop?
I think that is one of the benefits. But it is not the only benefit. So there are benefits to the efficiency and effectiveness of the services provided by developmental disabilities and the broader health and human services. There are benefits to general services and the space here in this building and those consolidations. So I think there are multiple benefits that we see from.
Right, and obviously, monetarily, the overall sense is their value is worth the difference in the remodeling versus the new building. And everyone knows I love new buildings. I do. I love solar, but I'm just asking these questions as baseline to me.
Commissioner Berney, I think too, with the conversation we're having now of consolidation, the delta of the difference in cost shrinks if we free up the elections building too. So then, that creates an efficiency, so there's less additional expense.
So final thing thank you, Karen, I'm sorry. So for me, I hear many moving targets. Elections building, the disposition of whether there will be a new courthouse or not. What's happening with the space Eugene is renting, and with the stability of the receipt in dollars we're getting, the potential of going into debt $10 million, and yet I also understand the enthusiasm that has been shared with us about the ultimate vision and why, for so many reasons, logistically, service level, et cetera, this makes sense. I'm really pulled because I don't want to right now commit to option 3. I don't want to, but in a perfect world, that seems like by far the best option. So that's where I'm pulled, and that's why I just want to slow down, and so we see how these things sort of fit together, and that's really my only point. And my other point is, it felt like I was being oversold a bit. Obviously, some of us have soft spots for solar, and some of us have soft spots for CLT. But I don't think that for this Board of Commissioners, that should be the ultimate decision-making kind of thing. I think it's really function and cost, simply. So forgive me, but I'm on the fence regarding all of these options at this point in time, and I hope that's okay.
Chair, just real briefly, I'd say appreciate Commissioner Berney's comment about being cautious and diligent in this process, and I would say I agree with that approach. Our attempt here was really to look at the long term. So if you want a short-term fix to some of the challenges with developmental disabilities, option 1 is the way to go. It fixes sort of the immediate short-term issues. It doesn't address the bigger picture, longer-term challenges. So that is the other piece of why we're really bringing this forward, is to say there is a bigger picture, longer-term solution that we think we should be considering, understanding that there are a lot of moving targets that have to be factored in.
Well, I guess if that's the case, then the next question is, how time urgent is a long-term fix?
Thank you, Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Burney, and I'll let Carla chime in on that as well. What I will tell you is it is extremely urgent. We are absolutely out of space for our staff. I know we need to hire even more staff, given the fact that our numbers have increased, and we've been kind of on hold while we've been trying to sort out where's the best place to invest in terms of facilities. And frankly, in thinking about long-term solutions, an outcome I very much want to avoid is having us spend significant dollars to remodel the space in this building, only to a few years from now either not be able to fit in this space anymore and need to look at a different solution, or hear that things have opened up and really the organization would rather have developmental disabilities in a different location so that elections could come into this building. So that's a piece of why we pushed pause on the remodel, so we could have this larger conversation and make sure we're on the right path long-term. So Carla, do you want to speak to urgency?
So I would say coming up with a plan is urgent, because right now, while we've been able to accommodate an additional growth in staff by taking over some additional space in the PSB, we are at capacity at this point, and not only in terms of seating, but really in terms of lobby space, in terms of rooms for people to meet. A lot of the work we do is not just seating, it's people coming in for meetings and for us to do trainings. And so we're really challenged for the daily meetings with smaller or larger groups, depending, to have enough conference rooms as well. And in order to build more conference rooms, that means we take away more seating because of the issue of only having a limited amount. In addition, if we're going to look at something like moving into a different location, it would be a couple of years out, potentially 3 years out, depending on how much time. And if the growth continues, we will get to a point where we literally cannot hire additional staff in order to provide the services. We are only, in addition, in terms of our budget, we bill DHS for that money. So they don't, for example, give us a payment every month. We have to provide services and bill for it. And so having the staff in order to provide the services, in order to bill it, leads to the ability to pay for a building. So that's why I would say, while maybe tomorrow we don't need to have this additional seating, in a couple of years we're going to, and it's going to take this amount of time in order to have it all come together correctly.
Some of my questions have been asked and answered, but I do have just a few more. First, when we're looking at this at the 50,000 foot level and knowing that it will take 2.5, maybe 3 years to build this building, and versus the remodel, I actually narrow the three choices down to those: either build the new building or stay where we're at. I'm not a fan of trying to retrofit a building that's not quite adequate. And if there's an incremental, addition to make it everything that it needs to be and accommodate future growth, I'd rather go there. But as we decide which way to go with the space here, have you been able to prepare like a timeline when a remodel would, how long a remodel would last and when you would have to move out regardless with your growth model?
Well, so it sounds like maybe Commissioner Buck, there's a couple questions in there, and Bill, maybe you could talk about timing, because even if we were to say proceed with the remodel, that doesn't happen instantly either, so there's some lead time there. And then I don't know, Carla, if you have thought about when we exceed that capacity, given our current trends.
So I would say in terms of our growth capacity, we're about 2 to 3 years out if we continue to add staff at the rate we're adding staff. I would say, I know that we have talked about the remodel and what that looks like, and I'll go ahead and defer to Bill in terms of the timeline.
Commissioner Buck, I think we had started work on the remodel downstairs, so we're not really starting from scratch, and the program hasn't changed. I would estimate it would take about a year of design, bidding, construction to get them into the expanded space if you gave us the direction today to do that.
So I think the bottom line I'm trying to get at is, are we going to be, even if we did the remodel, are we going to be having this conversation again in 2 years? And I'm seeing nods, yes. So we're going to have to talk about it anyway. Which makes me lean towards going to a new building, because, then elections wants to move in here and yet remodel it again for their design. I feel like that's a waste of public money, an absolute waste of millions of dollars. So I don't really have any inkling to go that route if we're going to be having this discussion again. The other question, though, that I would have is regarding the funding. So the $10 million bond, can you tell me a little bit more about how that is structured? When you talk about how it was similar to the Charlton building, I'm assuming this is not a bond that has to go out to voters?
Correct. Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Buck, that's correct. We would be looking at it similar to how we financed the mental health building when we built it years ago and when we purchased Charlton. And I did not bring with me today details in terms of payment schedules or those pieces. We can bring that back to you. But the general idea would be that the county would sell bonds that we would pay out of our general revenue. So we would not go to the voters for that. We would be able to pay those back out of our anticipated revenues.
Okay. Well, that would place me in the new building category.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good series of questions. I particularly enjoyed listening to Commissioner Berney talking about how this juggles with all the other questions that we have regarding facilities. Commissioner Berney, I was a city councilor in this building. So the City Hall moved to this building while I was still a city councilor. So that's how long we've been waiting for something to happen on the top floor here. So all of this is nebulous. We don't know when certain things are going to happen. That being said, the only thing I'm going to say is I am in full support of moving forward with option 3. I've spent a great deal of time, a lot of hours in that armory, and not just as a commanding officer in one of the rifle companies. But I've spent a lot of time in that armory in the last couple of years, and I understand the limitations and drawbacks to the existing facility. Built like a 1957 grade school, and it acts and is going to behave like a 1957 grade school. So there's not much you can do to it. So I'm in favor of Mr. Sider. The little bit of time that I've spent with you, you've been very deliberative in looking at existing facilities where somebody with my eye would say, hey, let's fill this space right now. You say, yes, but. And your yes buts always carry a great deal of weight and a great deal of importance in the final deliberation, the final decision making. Now, that being said, we have highest and best use that we're talking about right here, and highest and best use in that I've spent time, Carla, in your waiting room. Man, you say you've got 2 years in there. I don't think you have 2 hours in there. It's undignified for the people working there, the people being served there, the people visiting there. Yet we have to move forward with something. And as Commissioner Berney said, we have a lot of things that are, a lot of balls in the air right now. This is one that we cannot afford to drop at this point in time. The fragile lives that you are working with is essential that we move forward as quickly as we possibly can to take care of that element of it. So we have the highest and best use. And so I'm going to switch records right now. You've heard discussion regarding bonds and regarding finances. All of those questions will be answered as we move forward. But we have a third use of buildings, and I'm always going to talk about this, Karen. You know that I will. Mr. Mokrajewski, you know that I will. And that is, how do we use the facility in the meantime? We have highest and best use. We also have interim use. And I know this is not the place to discuss it in great detail, but you know that I am interested in using those dry square feet to the highest possible use that we can in the interim while we wait for the final decision on the two-story building that I hope we move forward with. And I know that we have a process in place, and Mr. Mokrajski, you and I think we'll talk more about this on Thursday, so I'll not belabor the entire board with the discussion regarding this. But we have a lot of services that can be provided there in the meantime. The only last thing that I'll say about this, and I'm not going to ask you questions because you've already answered lots and lots of questions, but if you have a statement to make, that's fine. But the only other thing that I will say regarding that is that we have dry facilities that can be used, and finding a way to make use of them in the interim is always going to be of primary importance to me. The building itself, about 3 years ago now, I raised a flag on that building, and not the flag for Reveille. I raised a flag on that building that it could be used. We'd been told that it couldn't be used, and I invited, our initial tour through that building was with Terry McDonald, and he and I created in our own minds this great vision of how it could be used in 2 weeks. You know, that was 3 years ago before the winter season. It was determined that we couldn't use it for those purposes as quickly as I had wished that we could use it for those purposes. But that's the point in time when the county started looking at it and saying, what is the highest and best use, rather than leaving it fallow as it has been since, when did it close, 20 years ago, Mr. Penwell? 20 years ago? Approximately that is when the Springfield Armory was built to replace it. So, so the fact that we're even having the discussion about using it is a huge step from when I first became a county commissioner, where it was completely unusable. So the urgency for me is that we move forward with getting DD into a dignified and appropriate space, but that in the meantime, we use our dry facilities to the best of our ability to provide services in ways that match the surrounding services, and in ways that we can give services to people who require them, need them, and will benefit from them immediately.
Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Farr, absolutely. On two accounts, I want to acknowledge the fact that you did point us towards the possibilities for this building, and I greatly appreciate that. I think you're right. It was one of those kind of oral history lores that we just couldn't possibly do anything with that building. So I appreciate you asking the questions and really opening up this opportunity we have to think about how we might use that space differently. And I know in the written materials, we talked about the short-term interim a little bit. And so thanks for lifting that up too for people who might be watching the meeting. While we're looking at our long-term solutions, we absolutely are simultaneously pursuing what could be an interim use of that space. And you referenced the fact that there are conversations happening right now with members of the community, some of the nonprofits you've heard from today, as a matter of fact, about what could we do with that space that doesn't cost a lot of money, requires significant investments, but puts it to use while the rest of this decision-making process happens. And so we have had, in fact, I think everyone at this table and others has been out to the building with Chris McAllister to talk about the ideas that he has for what might go into that space. And so we'll, I would anticipate within the next month, have a much more solid plan about what could be possible in the interim.
And the most recent was a large circle that we had in the former Assembly Hall.
Yes.
Just 4 weeks ago, I think, we all stood in that circle and talked about how do we get a yes on immediate use of the facility. And there's a great deal of positive energy toward getting to yes for an immediate use of the facility. So I will acknowledge that. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to have another round? Okay, go ahead.
So I'll first state that I will agree with Commissioner Buck and several other people. Option 2 is not an option for me. That's just a waste of funds to try and renovate that existing facility. So I'll put that one out there. But I'm still not sold that we've completely looked at option 1 and the other variables involved in it. You know, you talk about conference rooms. You know, I go on Outlook now and then to schedule conference rooms, and there's a lot of open space for conference rooms. You know, may not be down in DD's space, but there's got to be 15 conference rooms outside of DD in this building that don't get used all the time. So that, you know, it's that efficient use of space. You know, You wouldn't, in the private sector, you wouldn't build conference rooms for a division just so the division could always have them easily booked. You build conference rooms for the entire company to where they're getting used consistently. And you'd hold your conference, wherever you had to hold it to get it there. So, things like that still don't convince me that there's a need. So for me, yes, we may in 5 or 10 years have to buy a new building and move DD into a new building or purchase a building. But I don't have enough information to say I can absolutely go to a new building, right now, because I know we're going to open space up here. I know we're looking at, the courthouse project is going to change space here. And it may be enough to have both elections and DDE here. I don't know. And that's the question I haven't answered in my mind. And it's a question the voters will want answered in their mind. If we build this building, did we really need to? And now we're asking them for more money for a courthouse, even though we built this building with our own resources. And I want to be able to clearly look the voters in the eye and say, we absolutely had to build this building for DD. So that's kind of where I am right now.
Where I am right now is I would like to get to yes on option 3. To get to yes, for me, right, that the rest of you might not agree, I have to look at the financials of that $10 million. We are in, for a while, an artificially low interest rate environment. So if you're going to tie up money, I mean, the next chunk of the time is the time to do that. Although I'm not there yet, I want to get there, but Commissioner Bozovich makes points which I think are legit. So I'm looking forward to moving further in that regard. Whichever option we do, I would want to put a flag on there that it's under the condition that this winter there is a use for the Armory. To hear all of us well-paid people talking about a conversation for years is a little frustrating to me. And so, whichever way we go, I will propose that amendment to it, that Armory and dry space and inventorying dry space and what can we do immediately for next winter is going to be a part of a precondition I would need. I hearken back to when a gentleman I'm fortunate enough to know, a guy named Willie Brown, who used to be mayor of San Francisco, said in 3 days we're going to develop homeless shelter for 7,000 homeless people, and they did it. So whatever we do, my thrust is let's also take care of the most needy while we're taking care of our organization's ability to deliver services to the most needy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay. You have the discussion you were hoping to have?
I'll just briefly summarize that what I heard with some enthusiastic support. Generally speaking, what I heard was that the board is cautiously supportive of option 3, that you see the value in option 3 as a general proposition for the long term, that you definitely want to know more about how this would be paid for and financed, as well as to understand how this fits in the broader context of all of our facility needs and the other projects that are currently moving. So I think that's what we heard, and we will move forward in that direction. Really appreciate the questions and comments.
Okay, and we won't be voting on the order.
Right.
Correct, okay, thank you. Well, next up, thank you so much. We're going to recess the Board of Commissioners. We are going to convene the Lane County Board of Health, and we don't have any adjustments to the agenda. We are going to call a work session on item 5A. 5A? No. Item 2A. Item 2A, our work session and work plan strategies related to non-medical cannabis prevention for youth. Jocelyn Warren, Public Health Administrator, Elizabeth Maxwell, Senior Community Health Analyst, We set this up for a 1-hour presentation, a 1-hour time slot, 15 minutes for the presentation, and plenty of time for discussion. And so, without further ado, Ms. Warren, you can introduce the people there, and we'll get going.
Chair Sorensen and Commissioners, thank you for meeting with us today. I have with me Dr. Elizabeth Maxwell. She's the lead on our alcohol and other drug prevention team in the prevention section, as well as our other teammates, Abby Lee and C.A. Baskerville from prevention. So they've also supported us in this work and developing the strategies around the work plan. I also want to acknowledge Sarah Chinsky. We worked with her very closely as well in looking at some of the legal aspects of these strategies, and that has been really useful and helpful for us. I think we saved a lot of time up front rather than going down too far a path before we get some legal consult, so that was really helpful for us overall. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Maxwell, and she will talk a little bit more about some of the strategies that we're reporting back on.
Hello, good morning. So waiting for Dr. Warren will get it set up. You can go to the next one right away.
Go to the next one?
Yeah. So in the written report that we submitted, I just wanted to briefly explain some changes that we made. And so as we've talked about before, this whole area of prevention and for our community is kind of new. And so we are trying to be flexible and change as things change. And so there's been a push that we've noticed in our partners across the state, including state-level partners, to use the word cannabis instead of marijuana. And so we decided to go along with that. And I don't know how much you all are aware, some of the reasons for that is that some people feel that the term marijuana has a racist history. It was used to describe, people coming from Mexico and, decades ago. And so we haven't necessarily been able to corroborate that, but we just decided that it, whether we know it for sure or not, it just seems like probably the better way to go. And then there's also some people that feel that cannabis is a more scientific term and kind of more professional. So OHA is using that, HIPCDIP is using that. The commission that Dr. Ludke serves on, the Governor's Cannabis Commission, I believe is what they're called, is also, kind of pushing for the use of that term. So we just wanted to do that, and I just wanted to explain that because it is different in the report that we just submitted. And similarly, there's been a tendency sometimes to talk about recreational marijuana or recreational cannabis, and we decided to change that as well. And that was on the basis of the recommendation from Dr. Ludke, and he had explained that the commission he serves on, is trying to get rid of that word recreational. We don't say recreational alcohol. So why would, or recreational tobacco, so why would we continue saying recreational marijuana? So we're gonna go with retail cannabis, I think, is how we've landed. So I just wanted to explain that that's a difference. You can change it. So these are just to go back to some of the strategies that we had brought before you back in March. And so we have done some work with legal counsel for the county. And so we just kind of wanted to go back to these and kind of show you what we found out. And so one of the things that we had talked about was prohibiting non-medical cannabis lounges and non-medical cannabis at special events. And so you may be aware, I worked pretty closely with Alex Kyler, the county lobbyist, and he was monitoring that there was some state-level legislation that was being proposed that would have allowed cannabis lounges and allowed cannabis use at special events. Those all died in the last session, so that was good. It gives us a little breathing room to be able to do something if we want to. And so at this time, how we understand it is that county council has said that if you would like to pursue that, like tighten that up in the county so that those would already be prohibited, before another run happens at the state, you would have to order a special election and put that before the voters. So that's an option. And again, this is a way to strengthen the indoor
Clean Air Act. That's kind of how we look at it, as an extension of some of the tobacco prevention work that we've been doing. And historically in our county, as you know, we're usually kind of a little ahead of the game. So we would like to continue that if possible and maybe stay ahead of this. Next slide. So this is the 1,000-foot buffer between retailers, and if you'll remember, the city of Eugene already did this, and so this would essentially just be kind of piggybacking on what they've done. We don't feel that there's probably not a lot of stores, in, the larger Lane County that this would apply to, but it sends a message, right? It sends a message that we understand that density is a problem, that density is not great for kids, and so it's definitely something that you can pursue if you would like to. Next slide. So this one was talking about restricting some of the marketing, advertising. I think some of the things that you all found fairly concerning last time that we came was some of the naming that I shared with you, some of the packaging, and those are all OLCC things. And so what we learned from County Council is that because legislatively those things for enforcement have been given to OLCC, we actually are prohibited at the local level of really doing much. Like, you can't make any legislation at the local level. But what we can do is we work with people at OLCC, and so we can certainly work with them, share our concerns, and try to get the enforcement to be a little more in line with how we feel the law reads. And so this is working with the Lane County Fair Board, just again, kind of preemptively, just trying to make sure that we don't end up with having, cannabis advertising at events at the fairgrounds. And so again, this is just something that we can do and work with the County Fair Board to just try to get ahead of that before it actually happens. So it's not currently happening. There's no evidence that this is, has happened at any Lane County Fair event, but we just maybe would like to get ahead of it. Next slide. And so this one, we were exploring the discounting, kind of, some of the cannabis work. We try to piggyback on some of the things that have been done with tobacco. So this is something that has been done in the tobacco world, that we know that if, things are a lower price point, then it tends to be easier for people who might be more vulnerable, kids or other people, to gain access to these things. And so how we were advised by County Council is that we actually can't really do this at the local level. So again, this would be working with Alex, which I already work with Alex regularly, work with Alex, and just he would be monitoring, and we would be sharing with him, our concerns and what we're worried about. And he might be able to help us do something at the state level. And actually the prevention team will be having a meeting with Alex this summer. He's recovering from how his spring went and how busy he was. But yeah, he's been very supportive of prevention, and so we'll probably have a meeting with him in August so that all of us can share with him, the issues that, we're all concerned about, and then he can help us monitor those at the state level. Next slide. And so this was one that I believe Commissioner Sorensen suggested the last time, and it was to try to see if we might be able to increase the taxes that we're getting at the local level. And it looks like, again, we're going to have to put that on Alex's plate. So that's not something, according to County Council, that we can do at a local level. We had the option of opting into that 3% tax, which we did, and legislatively, that's all that we are able to do, is our understanding. Go ahead. This, of course, we can do. We will be gathering information on community use and readiness, and we will be focusing on youth and looking at some of the retailers. And there's a couple different ways that we'll be doing that. We have an epidemiologist starting August 5th who will be specifically focused on marijuana, although she can work on other substance abuse issues, but her primary work will be on marijuana and trying to gather some of this data and figure out what is the impact that this is having on our community, although, as we all know, it's pretty preliminary, but we're going to do the best we can to try to get that snapshot. And then we'll be looking at attitudes, concerns, access, and we'll look at a variety of methods to get that information and maybe bring it back to you at some point. Go ahead. So staff and community trainings, we already started this and had one on May 23rd that Dr. Warren and I kind of put on together with Dr. Bovee from the Methadone Clinic, and he did an awesome job, as he always does. And it was a great discussion, and there's just some topics that have a lot of resonance with communities. And this is one of them, and so we had a really good turnout. It was really standing, it was a full room, and he did a great job of talking about some of the issues. And so that was a start. And then Abby Lee and I are doing a training August 21st, I believe, that's been requested by all the school superintendents. So we will provide the school superintendents information about cannabis. They've requested some specific things, and then hopefully it'll trickle down into, principals, vice principals, and staff. So that hopefully, we're hoping that we'll get a lot of bang for our buck out of that. And then community trainings. I know that Abby and the rest of the prevention team are thinking about, some kind of community-wide training, and we already do these. I do these pretty regularly on naloxone trainings. That's a different topic, but we do have that expertise, and so I think that we'll be able to put those on, and we try really hard to go to the communities. We just had a naloxone training in Oak Ridge last week, so I think that we'll be able to do some great work with that. Go ahead. So this is one of the other things that prevention wants to do is to try to make a task force made up of some of the cannabis retailers, and so we're just starting that work. What we're hoping is to find some of the people that are doing a little better job in the community that seem to understand that their product may have an impact on youth, may have an impact on other vulnerable people, and that they appear to be trying to, stay within the law and maybe even go beyond, and just, I showed you the last time I showed you some storefronts that were very different, right? There's one storefront, very opaque. If you didn't know what the green cross meant, you would not know what that store is, as opposed to very flashy, neon, it's gonna, parents are gonna end up having uncomfortable conversations with their kids based on things that they're seeing in the community. So that's what we're hoping to do, and hoping to build some partnerships so that, we can get maybe a little bit of self-policing going on in the community. That'll be a long-term strategy, but we'll be starting that work soon. So just to summarize, your options are local policies. So we can, as I said, it would be a special election if we looked at the lounges and use at special events. The 1,000-foot buffer, something that you can definitely do. City of Eugene already did that. Lane County Fair, if that's something that you're interested in, prevention staff can work with them. That should be not a real difficult thing to do. The other local efforts, like I said, we'll be doing some community and retail assessments, trainings, the task force development that I just described, and then Alex, it's too bad Alex isn't here. We could loop him into what we're going to lock him into, but looking at discounting and taxes, and then other state efforts. We have contacts at OLCC locally, and so we can definitely work with OLCC to explore maybe why enforcement looks a little differently from how we would look at it and how they look at it. And so we could try to build those relationships and hopefully improve that for our community.
So this basically represents our summary slide of everything that Elizabeth has just presented. As a reminder, this is the reporting back on the original strategies that we proposed that we were asked to provide some more information on. So this represents that work. We also have our ongoing body of work that the prevention team is currently doing around community education and engagement, some of which was represented here. But this is your opportunity to let us know what type of direction you would like us to take.
Okay, we'll have plenty of questions and comments from commissioners, starting with Commissioner Farr.
Mine is very short. Dr. Maxwell, thank you. I've witnessed your work, and I really appreciate watching what you do and the preciseness with which you do it. My question is just a simple one and a quick one. We have a mental health advisory committee at local drug and alcohol planning committee. Same committee. Can you explain how their involvement in the process has happened so far and what the plans are for the future of our advisory committee?
Yeah, so the Mental Health Advisory Committee, Local Alcohol and Drug Planning Commission, does that sound right? Yes, longest acronym ever. Yes, so they have been involved in the local plan. So they were consulted and Doug Daniel did some focus groups with them. And so they consulted on that. They are still having interest in that. And the local plan obviously includes substance abuse. I can't recall if it includes cannabis specifically, but it definitely includes youth and concerns about substance abuse in our community. And I think, yeah, they definitely, we're going to have our yearly retreat in October. And so I think this is something that we could talk to them about. They've been aware peripherally, you keep this on the table. There's a few of us, there's another member who is also very, very concerned. We have a member from the coast, and he has concerns about advertising in his community, specifically radio advertising and other kinds of advertising. So he's definitely been keeping it on the forefront of the commission. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think that we're ending this year and coming up on a new year where we'll have a new work plan. So I think we have a lot of potential there that we could definitely maybe facilitate some work on this. So, and Alex always comes to our retreat as well, because we try to keep that policy issue in there at the state level as well, so.
And he also makes several presentations throughout the year, so he's closely involved. And Commissioner Bozovich, Doug Barrett is the coastal member, Doug from the tribes. So the reason I asked those questions, Doctor, is that I just wanted the board to understand that we have a team of professionals who you work with who are on that committee, who provide ground level input. And the things don't simply come from staff, they come from staff plus the many resources that you touch. Thanks for all the work.
Yeah, thank you.
The only quote that I wrote down from you is that this is an extension of some of the tobacco and prevention work we've been doing, and it's an extension of the Clean Air Act. This is all consistent with our approach for the last 7 years, as far as I know. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments? Commissioner?
So I really appreciate all this work because, as libertarian as I am, I have this thing about the need to protect youth who don't have fully developed brains yet and have the ability to make good decisions around using substances that can permanently damage them, and cannabis can permanently damage the brain. It's well studied and well proven, and particularly of developing brains. So I appreciate the work that you're doing in trying to keep cannabis out of the hands of our youth, because that's really important. The one thing that kind of isn't up there that would be great if we could have a conversation. Our local paper here, the Eugene Weekly, devotes probably half of their advertising to cannabis. In fact, their current issue, the full page ad on the back is a cannabis ad, and half the time those sit out in places where youth can easily pick them up. In fact, a lot of the places that the weekly's available are particularly youth-oriented, and half the time they're in the bin turned upside down, so what you see is an ad for cannabis, constantly. And the things that are in the weekly, all the concert ads and happenings, local happenings and all that stuff are attractive to youth. Can we have a conversation with them maybe about, their promotion of cannabis in a paper that is highly read by youth?
Yes, I think we can definitely have a conversation with them. The prevention team works really closely with Jason Davis, our public information officer, and we've had similar issues. Another paper that I won't name sometimes has tobacco ads, and that's prohibited. And so we have had conversations. And so yes, as to whether it will produce any results, I can't tell you that, but yes, we could definitely do that.
Yeah. I know that they're free to sell their space to who they want, and I'm really not looking to control the press, but it seems like a little self-control, because I do know at least the news staff at the Weekly is real concerned about youth. They talk about it quite often in their articles. If they have such a focus on protecting youth in other ways in vulnerable populations and at-risk populations, why are they promoting something that can be so destructive to youth?
And it may be that task force of retailers that we're talking about, that may be another way of bringing that up. And it may be, if you have not had that public health training or that exposure in your life, you might not know, right? I'm willing to say that. And so it could be that we could do some education of retailers, and then maybe the retailers themselves would decide, hey, maybe I don't need to advertise in this way.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the Register Guard's starting to have ads for cannabis also. Yeah. Yep. Yep, it's not as prevalent.
So we need to have
Forgive-
a conversation there, too.
Yeah, well, forgive me, but in a perfect world, what would ultimate success of this initiative be? What would it look like that it doesn't look like now?
I think that what it would look like is somehow we could have our county look the way I think the voters intended. So, what I hear anecdotally, and I'm a parent in the community as well, is there's just too much advertising. It just normalizes it too much. And you're all listing ways that you're aware, right? Like, oh, now there's ads in the Register Guard, there's Eugene Weekly. All of us who've lived here a while remember when Eugene Weekly was different, right? It was different before 2014 or 2015. So I think that, I don't think the law needs to necessarily be changed. We're not saying anything about adult use. We are saying, hey, what about youth? What can we do about impaired driving? We're not talking about impaired driving today, but we might come before you a different time, and pregnant women. And again, individuals can make their own choices, but we want to make sure that nobody in the industry is giving out health information. Right?
So are
That's
you
a whole
trying-
other
oh,
thing
I'm
that
sorry.
we could talk about. So do you see what I'm saying? That we're not saying that adults can't use safely. We just would like to tone it down a little bit to keep youth safe.
So this is a question. So are you saying that the goal of, I assume this is a grant-driven activity?
This is funded by marijuana proceeds from taxes.
Right, thank you. So is the goal that no advertising ideally reaches young people? I mean, is that the intent? Is it? Well,
No, I think.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And the goal, I think, would be for us to work with OLCC so that there were no ads that were questionable, as in having something on them that appeals to children. That seems to, I showed you examples last time that they do that strain names did not have names that appeal to children. And you can't do anything about that, at a local level, law-wise. But we can talk to OLCC and we can say, hey, this is how the law reads. This is how you appear to be enforcing it. So yeah, I think advertising, I'm not saying we shouldn't have any advertising. There's 3 statements that are supposed to appear on every single ad, and they do not.
Gotcha. Do you think if there was no advertising to youth, there would be any impact at all in youth consumption of cannabis?
I think there
Because
probably,
you're the expert, I'm not, yeah.
I think there would be an impact, yeah. I mean, it's in our community, and we definitely hear that one of the ways that kids get a hold of it is when the parents or the caretakers in their lives don't keep it appropriately locked up, right?
Right, so
how they
that's an
get
educational kind
That's how they get alcohol. So, yeah, and so that's a whole nother thing that we can do is educating the community, so.
No, I really agree. I'm just asking, I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I've read statistics that say that, after we went through this whole thing with nicotine and tobacco and advertising and what have you, that now nicotine use amongst young people, teenagers, is significantly on the rise. And that's why I was asking you the correlation between the activity and the hoped-for intent. That's all.
Yeah. I think if I understand what you're referring to is, I think that all of the things that had been done for decades on nicotine, I think they did have an impact on youth use and actually across all of the ages. And right now, what we're seeing is a rubber band effect with the juuling and with the vaping. And
Correct.
so that is a whole nother, I'm not here to talk about that, but that's a whole nother issue.
It's a whole nother issue. It's related, and as you're a parent, I'm a parent and a grandparent. My wife taught for 30 years, and the impact that's having in the schools is just unbelievable in terms of learning environments.
Right.
That's all. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. but-
Agreed. Thank you.
Anything further?
I'll just say that I'm supportive of your work. I think it's super important to be able to make sure this issue for youth and children is addressed. I perfectly understand that it is a legal form of retail for adults, and that's okay too. But it should parallel our work on behalf of youth with, other adult consumption methods. So thank you for what you're doing.
Okay, Commissioner Farr?
No, thank you.
Okay. Let me just say that, first of all, I really appreciate all of your great work in this area. I think that, as far as I'm concerned, it's full speed ahead on all these measures. I guess I would maybe make an exception. One is, if you can't do everything, then you might have to prioritize, of what's most likely to result in the best prevention. The other thing I would mention is that in terms of advertising, I kind of view it as this task force reaching out to the people that are doing the advertising, namely the people that are paying for the advertising, maybe the advertising agents, maybe the companies that are promoting their product legally to adults, but to be cautioned regarding promoting those products illegally to children. And I would draw a distinction between going out and trying to monitor the news media, such as the Register Guard, Eugene Weekly, TV stations. I believe that our role is really more with the people that are driving it, who are paying for the advertising, because if they will be more aware of their responsibilities, and in certain cases where they do this illegally, we need to call that attention to either ourselves if we have any remnant role, or if not, OLCC or other people. I kind of view the going to the press as sort of, not really our role, because number one, they're independent of government. And number two, they're not really pushing this. They only get paid when people bring them money. And so I don't really like the idea of like going to the press as, hey, you shouldn't get money to do this. And well, now if they are breaking the law in terms of the advertising, I view that as not an educational thing, but an enforcement thing. And I think that with regard to all the other people, the shops and the brand names and the advertising, to me, that's a really good role for us. So if there's no other options for us on the current side locally, because we've been preempted from so many other activities, then I do think we should put our legislative work together and see if we can look for opportunities for lifting preemption in areas where we need the help. And money is one of those areas, obviously, that I think we need to constantly work on. But, you guys are doing great. I'm sorry this is happening because from what I don't have, my grandchildren aren't at the age where I know a whole lot about what's going on, except at the preschool and lower grade levels. But from what I hear from constituents who have middle school kids, it's all over the place at the middle schools and high schools, and we're just not doing enough to interdict this problem. And I think that the public, maybe the parents, are not aware of the seriousness of the problem. So it's enforcement, it's education, it's, and I kind of like your idea of thinking about the terminology that we use, because the term recreational marijuana, it almost sounds like, oh, well, let's go out recreationally hiking and recreationally swimming and recreationally playing volleyball and other things that might be actually good for someone of my age to do more of. But this isn't about that. It's back on the topic, Pete. It's more like we're using a term like recreational, and it really de-emphasizes. We might even want to think about some, more aggressive terms like harmful use of marijuana by children, Because, and there's been a lot of research on the packaging fight over tobacco, right? And she said, well, cigarette smoking may harm. Well, hey, I'll take my chances. And if it may harm, well, cigarette will kill you, see? And so I think that we need to think about how we use that language. And thank you for starting your whole presentation with that whole, description, because it is a serious thing. And, and for people who are parents of grade school and middle-aged kids, we need almost a curriculum for them on, hey, folks, this is not something to play with. This is not something to take, lightly. It's pretty serious. And there's, at a minimum, the Indoor Clean Air Act issue of exposure to smoke. That's one of the big ones that I see. But there's lots of others, I'm sure, that are out there. Anyway, thank you. And do you need anything from us besides go forth and do good?
We can start preparing sort of, work plans and filling out exactly the timelines and what this would look like to work on each of these options.
Okay.
Great.
All right, well, thanks a lot.
Do that. Thank you.
Keep up your good work. So with that, we will, I guess we'll recess our Board of Health meeting and possibly not to reconvene it, but we will now reconvene the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. And we've done all of our morning business, I guess, as potential for executive session and other business. Mr. Mokrowski, do you see the need for either of those?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I missed the question.
We're down, as far as I can tell, we're down to executive session
Yes.
or other business as being what we've got left for the morning.
We have exec session was planned for the afternoon. You could try to sneak it in now if you wanted to.
Do you know the length
cover
of
the
that executive
commissioners.
session?
I can check. I don't have that off the top of my head. You could do commissioner's business.
I know that Ms. Jones requested that we put that executive session on for tomorrow, and I did announce that we were amending our agenda for tomorrow to include the executive session.
Yeah, it's a separate executive session.
Oh, it's a separate one from this one? Okay, well, do we know if the executive session, the other one, could be done this afternoon after our public works items?
The one planned for tomorrow? Or
No, the one from today.
Yes, that was the plan.
Yeah, okay,
To do it after that. So if
Okay.
you wanted to do commissioner's business now, you could.
okay. So why don't we, because we do have about half an hour before the noon hour.
Or we can do, I'm sorry, or we could do exec session. So if you want to adjourn and go into exec session, we could do that now. It's
Okay.
your choice.
What's the preference of the commissioners? Okay.
I'm open to doing commissioner business now.
Okay, why don't we do that? And that way we can be sure we're not rushing the executive session, because I have no idea how long that might take. So why don't we go then to item 12A, which are commissioner announcements, 12A. Any commissioner announcements? Commissioner Buck.
I just want to let everybody know that we finally had our Sears Road community event yesterday evening in Cottage Grove. We had a decent amount of folks attend, which was good because we were competing with the symphony down there at the same time, so that was a little challenging. But we did get a good amount of folks there, and I thought the meetings went really well. We did little breakout sessions, so we could come up with different scenarios and solutions that the community was interested in. I have to say, overall, there wasn't a huge appetite for a lot of trees coming down. But there also is a possibility of doing rumble strips on that road, which a lot of the residents that live on that road were very interested in. And the grant may be able to do a combination of those things. So we'll be looking at, I believe staff will be going down and contacting each resident to see which trees they are not interested in coming down, and finding a way in which to possibly include rumble strips on the center lane. And, right, center lane, yes. There's no space on the edges to do that, which is part of the whole problem we're talking about with safety anyway on the road. And then the residents really did provide a good laundry list of other things that they would like to see in the future. Fog lines, reflectors, more signage, deer crossing signs was a big thing. So this particular grant does not include funding for those items, but they were all very good for us to know and are now on our radar. And hopefully we'll get, after a little debrief and final interest from the residents on the road, we'll see staff come back with an alternate recommendation.
Okay, any other commissioner announcements? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Farr.
Just two very quickly, and one will be a window into a future announcement. The fair board met throughout the fair, and I was in attendance at a couple of their meetings. The fair was overall very successful, but I really wanted to point out, Mr. Mokrajewski, that I heard from a lot of people who had attended the fair that the most popular event, particularly for people with kids, was our Public Works, the kids zone. And for a number of reasons, we went there at the end of the day on Sunday, and everybody was exhausted, crabby, tired, and we got to the kids zone, and all of a sudden, happiness reigned. And it was in no small part because of the misting tents and the otter pops didn't hurt. But generally speaking, the things that were going on in the Public Works site, the kids zone, were really uplifting. The staff were there. They were good with kids. They were talking to kids face to face, one-on-one, and really creating smiles at the end of a hot day that where, you know, by the time people get there, they aren't always the happiest people on earth. They should be. They're at the fair, right? But that's not always the case. So the only thing I would say about that is maybe one excavator is not enough. And the sign where kids could put their faces into the, I was one of the kids who did it to be a flagger. Maybe several of those, you know, a little bit more activity for the kids, because the kids really loved being there. It was really just a wonderful, wonderful event at the fair. The second thing I'll say is that I had a chance yesterday to meet a new Lane County staff person, Bob Surens, who is, the title is Homeless and Supportive Housing Services Supervisor. We may recall Pearl Wolf in the past, or Alex Dreyer had that position more recently. This is the person who coordinates the work of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, coordinates the work of the subcommittees of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and a number of other areas. If you have an opportunity to meet Mr. Surens, he comes from the LA area where he's worked on poverty and homelessness issues down there extensively. Seeing some of the things that we see a little bit of here in greater depth, and seeing some things that we've not seen here that we may anticipate for the future. So I'm excited about him being on the job. Had a good meeting with him yesterday, and we will all have an opportunity to meet with him. He's excited. In fact, he named each of you by name as people that he would like to meet by name. He knows who you are already. He's been on the job, I think, Mr. Mokrajewski, about 1 week on the job. So welcome, Bob Surens, and thank you for joining us here in Lane County. Mr. Chair, thank you.
I would just like to remind everyone that, well, first I thank the board and the public for their indulgence in allowing me to attend the kickoff for the Lane County Tour of Homes, which is now going on. It used to be from one weekend to another, 9 days, and now it's just 2 weekends. But next weekend will be the final weekend of the Tour of Homes, 13 homes, and I highly recommend that. They are very interested and want to understand what the talk about a potential housing bond might look like. I told them there is no there yet, but I just wanted to let you know that there's interest generated from other areas. And in that regard, I would just like to share, and I can't use their names, but 2 years ago, a Hispanic couple was homeless in Springfield. And what really moved them to having a home, they didn't know what services in the county were available. But she did get a job at Bi-Mart. And Bi-Mart has literally, through that employment, not only assisted that family of 4, and they're living in a home, and she also wants to input what our housing bond might look like, but she now has been accepted to the University of Oregon, and I just want to let this group know that one of the areas that I intend to have a small amount of stipend support for is translation assistance so that I can meet with the burgeoning Hispanic community of Springfield. And we can discuss their needs because sadly I should be, but I'm not bilingual. But this is the woman who I would hire, right? People that are of the community, that need the assistance, that have families to raise, and that can provide a needed service so I as a commissioner can do my job better. Thank you, that's all.
So it's that time of year because we're down next week. I have to make this announcement this week. It's Scandinavian Festival time, coming up on August 8th through the 11th out there in Junction City. And you know, that's another family-oriented event, fun time out there. Go out there and get your able skeevers and your Swedish meatballs and meat pies and all that good stuff.
And run the flattest 10K in Oregon.
Yes. Definitely the flattest 10K in Oregon out there around Junction City, but not the least windy, though. Right. So time to, everyone's a Viking, you know, for that weekend. You can just come up there. It doesn't matter what your heritage is. So it's a fun event.
If you're able, you can have skeevers, right?
Yeah.
That's right. I guess under Commissioner's announcements, I'll mention that the board is aware of this, but the board received an email from Dr. Casey Creer, Lane County Auditor, that he gave his 60-day notice that he is leaving his post as Lane County Auditor. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm also glad for his opportunities elsewhere. I think this means that the Board of Commissioners needs to move forward on a plan for what we're going to do in light of this resignation. I think the 2-month period or 60-day period, ends in September, I believe, sometime in late September. So we need to get on that, and maybe under agenda team requests, we'll get something started on that. Okay, any other commissioner announcements? Seeing none.
I'll just mention, Mr. Chair, that your committee, our committee, has been looking at that.
Okay.
Since the email went out.
All right, excellent. Okay, are there any agenda team requests? This is item 12B. And I'll just say, in light of the audit committee working on that, I won't have an agenda team request. We'll just get a report from them.
And they will need our authorization to do any work on it, but they've been kind of buzzing among themselves about it.
Okay. All right, any other agenda team requests or things people want to bring up under that? No? And number 12C, work session requests. Commissioner Farr, what do you think would be a good timeline to have a work session on the matter of Dr. Creer leaving?
You know, Mr. Chair, I would suggest as soon as possible, because with a 60-day timeline, last time we were not quite sure, but it took an extensive period to recruit and hire Dr. Creer. So.
Okay. I think we'll plan on then just the next board meeting, at least to have some time to get a report on what any one of us know about that. Okay. Are there any other commissioners who want to be recognized under 12C work session requests? Okay. Seeing none. Can we do a review of assignments thus far?
Sure, just that one, that maybe what we can do for although when is our next board meeting? Is August 20th?
It's 2 weeks.
Which I will not be here for. I'll be out of town.
Have to cancel it then.
Yeah, the discussion or my travel. So the request was I was thinking that we could do an update, and I'd like to have the HR director here.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you could still do it on the 20th. I don't know that I have to be here. The only thing I would put out there on this is, the board several years ago did have the conversation about whether or not to hire a county staff person as an internal performance auditor or to contract out for those services. And, this may be a good time to have that conversation to say, what's your preferred option, given the fact that you've cycled through the position a couple times here. But if the board's direction is to continue on the current course, certainly having the HR director here to talk about what that process would look like. So would you like to do that on the 20th?
Yeah, I think so.
August? Okay.
Yeah. And
we'll have that as
you
an
can,
assignment.
you can have Mr. Rickoff represent you at that meeting, and any ideas that you have between now and the time he's here, he can present those.
So that was the only assignment. I'll just share with you on that note that I did talk to one of the members, Mr. Hidgmans, who's a member of the Performance Audit Committee last Friday after the PSCC committee meeting. And he had asked about the role, and I said, the Board of Commissioners really needs to give direction on what it wants to do, and then the Audit Committee can engage in that process, but the board needs to make that decision. I suggested that one of the things the Audit Committee can be doing is filling the vacancy of one of the members. So they had one of the members has given notice that they're leaving to pursue another opportunity on the East Coast. So that's probably a role for that group, and while the board and HR are determining what the next steps for the position are. So I'll notify, so the assignment is for Human Resource Director to meet with the board at the August 20th meeting, maybe under county administrator announcements, just to talk about what the timing of that process and get any direction.
And maybe Dr. Kerr could also be invited, so we can make sure we get his input too.
Sure.
Okay.
So I recall that as Dr. Creer reviewed his results with us, one of the things he suggested we look at is how we retain various communities of color populations in the county, if I recall. Do we have an exit interview? I'm sure you do, but do you have an exit interview so we can sort of get at that, especially with him?
Yeah, for every employee that leaves the organization, we offer an exit interview through Human Resources, so that'll be available for him as well.
And there's an asterisk, he's our employee.
I was just going to think, I was thinking that. So he's one of 3 employees of the board. So it would be insightful, for me at least, to participate in that exit interview. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, I would even go as far as suggesting maybe that as we talk about the recruitment process, we also maybe ask HR to set up an exec session to have that exit interview, because I believe we can do that under exec session, so we can all hear the same thing at the same time. And I believe it's enough of a personnel matter, it can be handled under exec session.
I would just add that when we did have the presentation of his large report, I felt strongly that we needed to have a work session to follow up with that. And I thought we had multiple folks that on the board that was interested in that, although I haven't seen it on upcoming work session lists. And I would still like to see it there to follow up, regardless of whether he continues in that position or not. We still have a body of work that we should be acting on. So if there's a way to add that to our actual work order list, although I thought it was there and I just haven't seen it.
Okay.
I was just going to concur. I thought maybe it wasn't at a board meeting, it was at that presentation, but there were head nods. So it would seem it would be especially important to incorporate that to occur so that his presence could be part of that. I think that's what you were saying. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so a couple comments. I'm being asked if we could have the discussion about the performance auditor recruitment on August 27th, because on August 20th, we have a really full meeting, and it may be difficult to have the conversation you want to have on the 20th. My opinion is the 27th is still pretty close, given the fact I think Mr. Kerr gave 60 days, which would take us into late September. Yeah, late September. So if we can do August 20th, or 27th rather, for the performance auditor discussion. The other, I will just share, and so we'll have this conversation about the best way to conduct the exit interview, just so the board knows. Typically, we don't have the supervisors, the supervisor, in this case it's supervisors, of a individual who's leaving, conduct the exit interview for objectivity purposes. We have HR do that, collect the information, and then provide that to the department or supervisor. So if the board really desires to do that, you know, we can, but the process we do in the organization, we have HR reach out to an employee when they've given notice to leave, whether it's retirement or to seek another position, to have that interview. And so we would do the same thing here, unless the board feels really strongly that it would like to be involved in that process itself.
Okay, so, yep.
I don't know how the commissioners feel. I feel strongly I would like to be involved in that process, but only as a group. So it's, you know, it's up to you all, but I agree with Jay's point.
And my thought was a little bit opposite, that maybe one commissioner could attend, so it's not a quorum of commissioners. Let's talk about it.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure that we were covering that we do want to have a work session or board follow-up on this, and sounds like we'll have plenty of opportunities for different ideas at that time. Okay, so I'm seeing we've done everything on our morning calendar except for the executive session. So when we come back at 1:30, we will have our 2 public works items, about 10 minutes each. Then we'll have our review of any assignments at that point. We'll have our executive session. That will probably conclude the business of the day. Then we'll be having recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll have the work session with Peace Health on the birth center. We'll have the Good Neighbor work session. We'll have another executive session taking us probably at least till noon tomorrow. So, anyone want to call anything else to my attention? Okay, if not, then we are in recess till 1:30.